Chapter 1559. Although Kiran was puzzled, it was still very excited. It raised one of its claws and carefully removed the stone from its face. Let me see you. How did you get into the stone? Where is your mother? Mother has disappeared. My father and I are looking for her, but we can't find her. We can't find her. Shen Yanma felt wronged. He blinked his eyes and was about to cry. This little guy's every frown and smile was extremely infectious. When it pursed its lips, the little Qilin also felt sour in its heart. At the same time, it also felt that something was wrong. What do you mean by disappeared? She disappeared again. Was she taken away by Shui Lan again? She disappeared for 10 years because of this. After all, Shen Yanma was still a baby. There were some things that he could not understand. He did not know why his mother disappeared and how she disappeared. Therefore, he only wanted to cry. I don't know. Mommy doesn't want me anymore. She doesn't want my father anymore. We have been looking for her. There was nothing in the world that Shinjiuli could not find. After all, she had a child. She loved children so much. How could she leave the child and disappear for no reason? Kiran suddenly raised its head and looked at Shinjiuli, who had been standing next to it silently. Great Master, what is going on? My master. Shinjiuli was slightly stunned. He had not heard the title, Great Master, for a long time. Now, he heard it from Kiran. He felt a stab of pain in his heart, but his tone was calm. Nyenma, come here. Let's go back and look for your mother in other places. Okay. The little stone was about to jump out of Kiran's hand. Kiran quickly held it tightly, mainly because it was afraid that it would fall to the ground. How are you going to find your mother? Father said that we will look for her soul. Once we find her complete soul, she will be able to come back. Shen Yanma told it what he knew. Kiran's body suddenly shook, and its eyes widened. Her soul is gone. It suddenly raised its head and looked at Shinjiuli. Dizun, her soul is gone. Yes. This time, Shinjiuli finally replied with a word. Kiran felt as if he had been struck by a thunderbolt. After a long while, he said, why did his soul scatter? Who hurt her? Me. Shinjiuli's answer was always so concise and comprehensive. Kiran was instantly enraged. Blood rushed to his head. Why? Did she do anything wrong to you? I'm the one who let her down. Kiran's eyes reddened. She likes you so much. What right do you have to hurt her? In a fit of anger, he slapped out with his claws. A beam of blue light struck Shinjiuli's chest. Shinjiuli didn't dodge and let the blue light hit him. Kiran's martial arts had already reached a very high level. At the very least, he had reached Earth rank level 7. This time, it furiously struck out with its claws, which contained almost all of its power. Even if it hit a metal plate, it would still be able to create a large hole. However, after it hit the Dizun, his body did not move at all. It was as if he was not the one who was hit. He did not speak anymore. He just raised his sleeve, and the small stone in Kiran's hand automatically flew into his hand. Nyenma, let's go. He turned and left. Kiran was speechless. It angrily turned around 3 times in the same place. No, it wanted to go out. It also wanted to find its master's soul. Of course, it also wanted to know the truth. It was its master's family. It could not let her die without knowing the reason. Chapter 1560. Father, you are bleeding. Little Nyenma jumped in Shinjiuli's palm and tried to see him clearly. Shinjiuli's lips were indeed bleeding, but he used a cleaning spell to remove the blood. However, his face looked paler. Why did the Kiran hurt you? Little Nyenma was angry. Just now, it wanted to bite the little Qilin in the stone, but before it could do anything, it was brought back by its father, it should have done something. Shinjioli only said 5 words. Kirin was Ning Shuima's family. If her family wanted to beat him, he had no reason to fight back or avoid it. He did not even use his telekinesis to defend himself and took the hit. Although it was painful, what he needed now was a kind of pain. It was as if she would be able to come back after the pain was over. There was a surge of blood in his chest, but he forced himself not to show it on the surface. Little Nianma tried his best to look at him in the stone. After a while, he suddenly cried, "Father, I don't want anything to happen to you. Mommy is gone, and she doesn't want me anymore. Father, you can't lose your soul too. You can't lose me too. I don't want to be an orphan. Mother always said that orphans are very pitiful." He cried so loudly that it almost broke his skin. He was extremely smart. Obviously, he could see that his father was almost hurting himself. He did not seem to want to live anymore. The child's cries were heart-wrenching. If it could come out, it would probably cry by grabbing his collar. Shinjioli was shocked. He was indeed a little desperate now, and he was indeed tired of the world. That person was gone, and half of his life seemed to have been taken away. Every day and every night was a torture. Every moment was a heart-wrenching experience. But now, he still had Nianma. Nianma had already lost his mother. He could not lose his father too. Shinjioli raised his hand and patted Little Stone. No matter how upset he was, he did not want to affect the child. He smiled and said, "Don't cry, Nianma. Father is a god, and his soul will not disappear. Father will not abandon you. He will always be by your side. Nianma is a man. A man will bleed but not cry. Crying is the behavior of a bear. Stop crying. If you continue crying, you will drown the baby around you." Little Nianma stopped crying and corrected his mother. Mother said that this is called amniotic fluid, not fetal fluid. Your mother is right. Alright, don't cry. He held the stone and shook it gently. The little fellow felt as if it was in a cradle and finally fell asleep. Shinjioli was afraid that he would hurt his vital qi by crying, so he dripped another drop of divine blood into his body. Looking at his face, the little baby's facial features were exquisite. The corners of his lips and nose were a bit like his mother's, and his eyes were like his own. This temper, Shinjioli could not figure out who Nianma took after. It was definitely not like him. Although he did not remember how he looked like when he was a child, he should have such a cold temper. He was the kind that did not care about anything. Unlike this little guy, who cried and laughed at times. He was also very talkative and lively. His tears and laughter could affect people's moods, making people want to treat him well. In this aspect, he should be like his mother. His mother was probably like this when she was a child. When she laughed, it was as if the sky was clear and the moon was bright. It made people want to hug her. When she cried, it made people feel gloomy, making them want to hug her even more. Chapter 1561. His gaze fell on the sword hanging at his waist. The workmanship was exquisite, and the materials were exquisite. It was not some divine weapon. It was just that the materials were a bit special, and it was quite good for ordinary self-defense. The moonlight sword was a gift from Ning Shuima. He remembered that when she gave it to him, he proudly hung it on his waist and walked around the Sun-Moon sect, wishing that the entire Sun-Moon sect knew about it. Later on, he lost his memories of Ning Shuima, and this sword was always left in his storage space, gathering dust. Only when he recovered his memories did he remember this sword, and hang it on his waist again. His fingers caressed the sword inch by inch, as if he could still feel her aura and her temperature. As if he could still see her proud appearance when she gave this sword to him. This was the material she obtained after fighting the Moonlight Winged Dragon for close to a month, and it was her blood, sweat, and tears. The sword was still there, and the person who gave it to him, the familiar pain in his heart came again. He lowered his eyes slightly, standing in place for a while. He had already walked around the heavenly bestowal continent, so he should probably go to the immortal nation to take a look. After all, many things had happened between them there. Perhaps, he could find a part of her soul there. He turned around, and headed towards the immortal nation. The outside world was already turned upside down, but it was as if time had stopped in the immortal nation, and everything was still the same. Shinjioli walked slowly on the streets, and even walked around the shops from time to time. He hid his true appearance, so he was no different from the citizens of the immortal nation, so no one noticed him when he walked around. These were the places he had visited when he was with Ning Xuema, or when Ning Xuema had just crossed over. Now that he was revisiting these old places, he felt a sense of loneliness. Things remain the same, but people have changed, and tears flow before speaking. These were the words Ning Xuema had once recited in front of him when she was still alive. At that time, she was hugging his neck in his embrace, and reciting these words was just a forced expression of worry for the sake of creating new words. Who would have thought that it would become a motto? He strolled around the immortal nation. From time to time, she would buy a few things. These were things that she had bought in the past, and she liked them very much. Now that he had bought it, there was no one else to give it to, so he could only put it in his storage space. He even bought another steamed bun. The steamed bun was like a lantern when held up and like a chrysanthemum flower when put down. Every fold of the steamed bun was filled with an artistic aura. He remembered that when he brought her here for the first time, the first thing she bought was this, and she ate it with great relish. He slowly ate the bun. The steamed buns were actually very delicious, but when he ate them, he felt that his mouth was bitter and his throat was dry. Shen Nianma had also woken up. He peeked out from his father's sleeve and stared at the half-eaten bun in his father's hand. He asked curiously, "Father, is this delicious?" "Nianma wants some too." Shinjioli flicked the stone shell with his finger. "You can't eat it now. You can eat it when you're born and have teeth." Shen Nianma pursed his lips and reached out to touch his head. "Father, when will I be born?" Shinjioli paused for a moment. It's often said that after 10 months of pregnancy, the melon falls when it's ripe. You are 6 months pregnant now, so there should be another 4 months. Shen Nianma turned over and splashed water with his little feet. So long, Shinjioli stuffed him back into his sleeve. Grow up well in there. Grow up quickly. Chapter 1562. After Shen Nianma's torment, the pain in Shinjioli's heart seemed to have lessened a little. He had used the soul-searching spell to search every place he passed by, but he still could not find a trace of Ning Xuema's soul. Therefore, the possibility of her being there was almost zero. It began to rain without them noticing. The wind carried the drizzle with it, and it brought a touch of coolness to the front of their clothes. The people around them held up their umbrellas, and the streets were full of colorful umbrella flowers. It was very beautiful. A couple who were holding hands ran past Shinjioli. They shared the same umbrella and laughed as they ran past Shinjioli. When they passed by Shinjioli, the woman could not help but look at him. The couple's conversation could be heard in the wind. "Hey, why is that person not holding an umbrella? His hair is wet. Baby, you should be concerned about your husband. My hair is a little wet too. You can have the umbrella." "No way. I will be sad if you get wet. Let it rain on me." "Will the lock we just fastened be damaged by the rain?" "Don't worry, it won't. The bronze lock is not afraid of the rain. We want to be together for a long time, so the lock will naturally stay together for a long time." The two of them ran away as they spoke. Shinjioli's heart ached. He strolled and walked towards the Lover's Bridge. The Lover's Bridge was full of dense locks. Each lock was a hope, a hope. Shinjioli's fingers gently stroked the locks, and his eyes were in a trance. He seemed to see the girl in red coming with a sky-blue umbrella. Great God, should we also put a lock here? This is very interesting. A lock can lock a relationship. What a joke. Just tie it, just tie it. It is just a good luck. Do you not want to be with me for a long time? Alright, as you wish. Then what lock should we tie? Bronze lock. Iron lock. Hey, where did you find a jade lock? Iron and copper can produce embroidery, but this item will not produce embroidery. Aya, although the jade lock looks good and won't rust, it's afraid of falling. If it bumps and bumps, it might break. Don't be afraid. With the support of telekinesis, I'm not afraid of falling. N, you're so thoughtful. Then we'll tie it up and wait for me to carve some words. Some distant memories, the longer they were, the clearer they became. The clearer they were, the more heart-wrenching they were. The things that were once careless were now indescribably blissful. Only when they truly lost it did they realize that it was a wound that could never be healed. Just thinking about it was painful to the bone marrow. There was an umbrella in his hand, and it was exactly the same as the one she had used back then. Standing on this bridge again, she felt as if a lifetime had passed. Shinjioli didn't know how long he had been standing on the bridge. It was so long that his sleeves were wet and his cheeks were cold. He remembered the fate of the jade lock. She had taken it off and destroyed it before throwing it into the water. He opened his palm and the broken jade lock lay there quietly. There was a deep line between the names Shinjioli and Ning Shuema engraved on it. It was as if there was an insurmountable gap between the two names. It was just like the distance between him and her. He looked at it for a moment and kept the jade lock away. Then, he condensed a bronze lock and used a carving knife to carve a few words on it. Shinjioli, Ning Shuema, Shin Nyenma. The three names were connected by a heart shape, as if they were a family. He solemnly tied the bronze lock to the bridge and cast a few spells on it. This way, no one would be able to destroy it if it was tied here. This lock would be locked until the end of time. Chapter 1563. Shuema, Nyenma, and I have been waiting for you to come back. Where are you? He held the railing of the bridge and fell into deep thought. These days, he had been to all the places that he could. He even went to places that were impossible. He could not find any trace of her soul. This situation was very unusual. Even if she was disheartened before her death, her soul should still be there after being struck by the thunder. With his method of searching, it was impossible that he could not find any trace of her soul. Moreover, she was struck on Mount Buddha Lotus of the Sun-Moon clan. That place originally had the effect of gathering souls. If an ordinary disciple was struck and had their soul scattered, those scattered souls wouldn't even be able to escape Buddha Lotus Mountain. They would be scattered all over Buddha Lotus Mountain like gossamers, but they wouldn't know about it. If he wanted to collect them, he could at least collect 2 souls and 3 spirits. Ning Shuema was a level 9 earth rank before she died. She had not yet become a celestial being. Even if her soul was strong, it was impossible for all the scattered souls to escape without leaving a trace. This was not very reasonable. Even if she was the soul of a 9-tailed fox in her previous life, it was impossible for her to reach this level. He had already done a spell on Mount Buddha Lotus. Indeed, there was not a trace of her. Even her aura had disappeared. It was as if this person had never appeared in this world. It was as if there was a hand in the dark that erased all traces of her life in this world. He recalled the golden-purple lightning during her tribulation. If it was an ordinary person ascending from Earth rank 9 to Heaven rank 1st rank, the tribulation lightning would be silver lightning. If they were originally from the celestial race or the ordinary devil race, the thunder would be purple. For example, Lozine was from the celestial fox race, so the thunder would be purple. When a high-level celestial or devil was to ascend, the thunder would be golden. However, when Ning Shuema was going through the thunder, it was purple. Even if she were to ascend to level 1, it should not be this color. What was going on at that time? Could it be that she actually had another identity? Did she successfully ascend to her original state? But whether it was the immortals or devils in this world, he knew most of them. If there was an extremely high-level immortal or devil that succeeded in transcending the tribulation, the entire continent would be shrouded in auspicious clouds or devil clouds. It would be impossible for there to be no movement at all like now. He recalled her earliest origins. She seemed to have come from the other side of the black hole. Could it be that she had returned to her original world after the tribulation? With this in mind, Shinjiuli gripped the railing of the bridge tightly. Had he already gone to another world? Shuema, since you can travel to this space-time, then I can also travel to your space-time. Since you refuse to come back, then it's my turn to look for you. Lord Father, where are we going to look? Little Shirtu poked his head out. Nianma, do you miss your mother? Yes. Shen Nianma answered loudly without hesitation. Good. Then just call out to her in your heart from time to time and tell her that we're going to look for her. Nianma is calling her. Will she hear him? Yes. Mommy, I miss you so much. Mommy, I miss you so much. Shen Nianma immediately cried loudly. His voice was so loud that Shinjiuli's eardrums were buzzing. Shinjiuli was speechless. He patted little Shirtu and said, you don't have to cry out. Just think about it in your heart. If Ning Shuema had returned to her original state, then she must be a high-level celestial or devil. She and Shin Nianma were connected. If Shin Nianma always thought about her in his heart, it would create a magnetic field effect. Chapter 1564. As long as she was still alive, she should be able to receive it. It would form a reflection in her heart and be connected to Shin Nianma's magnetic field. As long as he could find a common magnetic field, he could follow that magnetic field to find her. In fact, he was taking advantage of his son, but he really could not care less. In the vast planet and the vast starry sky, there were countless space portals. Shinjiuli shuttled through various space portals, looking for the black hole that would only appear once in a few thousand years. However, his luck was obviously not good. He had been shuttling through these spaces for 2 months, but he still could not find it. Shen Nianma did not know how many times he had called for his mother in his heart, but he did not receive any response. This was also a big blow to him. Every day, he was listless in the small stone and could not lift his spirits. Father, does mommy really not want Nianma anymore? Father, is Nianma not obedient? Why doesn't mommy want me anymore? Father, Shen Nianma would always ask the same question a few times every day. Shinjiuli finally felt that it was not a way to go on like this. He could not leave a shadow on his child. Perhaps the way he found was wrong. Nianma, your mommy loves you the most. She will not abandon you. She is just too far away from us now, so she can't hear you. Let's look for her again. As long as we are close to her, she will be able to hear you and respond to you. Even if she doesn't want your father, she will not abandon you. After hearing this, Shen Nianma finally perked up and nodded heavily. Well, mommy will definitely want me. Perhaps my ability is not good enough. When my ability is better, I will be able to sense mommy. As he spoke, he pulled out a book from nowhere and began to read. The book was written by Shinjiuli himself. Of course, the book was also waterproof, so Shen Nianma could practice in it without any delay. It was strange that he was now 8 months old, but his body size was not much bigger than before. However, he was getting smarter and could often draw inferences from one case. In the process of looking for his wife, Shinjiuli did not neglect his son's education. He was originally an expert in teaching apprentices. Now, he was even more dedicated to teaching his son. He even specially designed a set of cultivation methods for his son. Of course, because he didn't have any experience in taking care of children, he had even bought books on how to educate children. Therefore, although little Nianma followed Shinjiuli everywhere, he did not delay much. He was not even out of his mother's womb yet, but he had already learned a lot of martial arts. Father, what do the 3 flowers of crowning mean? What this means is... Shinjioli was explaining to him when suddenly, the ground beneath his feet sank, and a strong force pulled him down. He staggered and almost fell. He quickly steadied himself in the air. At this moment, he was still in the starry sky. After passing through so many spatial doors, this was the first time he had encountered a situation where he was being sucked in. He looked down and saw a milky white vortex spinning below him. His heart suddenly jolted. Perhaps, there was some mystery behind this. Almost without hesitation, he stuffed Shin Yanma into his sleeve and jumped into the white whirlpool. Poof! He popped his head out from the bottom of the sea. When he got ashore, he found that it was a dead end. The whistling cold wind was bone-chilling, and the big stones on the ground were rolling. In this place, apart from the deep blue sea, there were rocks everywhere. There was no trace of green or human life. Chapter 1565. Shinjioli stood on the shore for a moment and felt a chill in his heart. This place was not a place where living creatures could survive. Even if Ning Xuema succeeded in her ordeal, it was impossible for her to come here. However, since he was here, he would not give up until he took a look around. Thus, he slowly walked forward. Desolate. Lonely. Cold. This was the only impression that this place gave people. There seemed to be a sad aura floating with the wind, which made people feel depressed for no reason. Shinjioli was stunned. This aura, it was vaguely familiar. Since it was a barren place with no people, how could someone have such emotions? He shook his sleeve, and little stone popped his head out. Shin Yanma's eyes were full of excitement. Mother's aura. Mother's aura. Shinjioli's mind was blown. He finally sensed it. This aura belonged to Shui Yimo. Moreover, this aura was very ancient and did not seem to have been left behind recently. He suddenly recalled that in Ning Xuema's consciousness, he had heard her say that in his previous life, Shui Emo, in order to revive him, banished herself to a barren land and made a coffin to commit suicide. His heart trembled. Was this place that barren place? He quickly walked forward following the aura. After a while, he paused slightly because he sensed another person's aura. After a while, he came to the bottom of a cliff. He looked up and squinted his eyes slightly. In the middle of the straight cliff, there was a small platform. On the platform, there was a blood-red coffin. Next to the coffin sat a person. His red robe was fluttering in the wind. Shui Lan. He did not expect to meet him here. There had been no news about him in the past few months. He did not expect him to come here. Shui Lan looked very decadent. He sat next to the coffin and stared at it as if he wanted to see it until the end of time. Shinjioli's eyes also fell on the coffin, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Although he didn't know the usage and effects of some of the forbidden techniques of the demon realm, this coffin was obviously strange. The bright red color seemed to be dyed with blood, revealing an extremely ominous aura. This coffin. Shinjioli's heart felt like it was being squeezed by someone. He flew up and landed directly on the platform. Shui Lan, who was lost in thought, probably heard the commotion. He raised his head and looked at Shinjioli, who was flying over. What are you doing here? Shinjioli ignored him. He floated in the air and carefully examined the coffin. The coffin lid had disappeared, and there was no corpse inside. There was only the coffin body lying there, as if it was a reminder of its existence. Hee, Shinjioli, you always thought that Momo owed you in her previous life, but she no longer owes you anything. I don't owe you anything. In her previous life, she used such a tragic method to commit suicide in this coffin. She used the fate of being an eternal cursed star in exchange for your rebirth. Shui Lan looked like he was crying and laughing at the same time. Shinjioli's face was pale. His eyes scanned the coffin again and again, as if he was looking for something. After a while, he asked, "Her corpse?" "It was burned." At that time, Momo and I accidentally broke into this place and saw this coffin. Only after the original owner read the memories of her previous life and burned the corpse and the coffin could her fate as a heavenly calamity star be unraveled. Therefore, Momo burned the corpse and the coffin. However, I don't know why this coffin reappeared. Shuailan pressed his palm on the coffin. When he raised his hand again, there was blood on his palm. Chapter 1566. Shuailan pressed his palm on the coffin. When he lifted his hand, there was blood on his palm. "This coffin is actually bleeding, hee, it's bleeding. Is this Momo's blood? Could it be?" Shinjioli's fingers were cold. 5 words suddenly appeared in his mind: blood curse soul return technique. This was very similar to the legendary Demon Realm's secret technique, blood curse soul return technique. Although Shinjioli had recovered his memories, he had only recovered the memories of 2 lives. One was Shui Mo's, and the other was Ning Shuima's. Before he met Shui Mo and before he met Ning Shuima, his memories of 3 lives were still blank. Although he didn't remember things from a long time ago, he faintly felt that he had lived for at least 10,000 years. But when he met Shui Mo, it was only 3,000 years ago. There were at least 7,000 years before that. In his memories of these 2 lives, there was no concept of blood curse soul return technique. But now, this term had suddenly appeared. Even he himself didn't know where this concept came from, as if it came from a distant memory. As far as he knew, this blood curse soul return technique was the highest and most tragic technique in the demon realm. The caster had to use all the blood in his body as a catalyst to condense a blood coffin. Then, at the cost of his soul being reincarnated as a heavenly calamity star in exchange for another person's rebirth. This was originally a method used by the higher-ups of the demon realm to trick the lower-ups into working for them. For example, if the higher-ups died for some reason, they could trick their loyal subordinates into using this technique. At the cost of their own life, the higher-ups would be reborn. This technique also had a legendary characteristic. In order to remove this technique, the reincarnated person had to return to this place and burn the blood coffin and the corpse. Only then could they break the fate of being a heavenly calamity star, achieve perfection, and obtain the greatest happiness. Because of this legendary characteristic, the subordinates of the demon realm once used this curse technique as a means to show their loyalty to their superiors. Some low-level demons used this curse technique without hesitation for the sake of the illusory great perfection in the future, just for the sake of their final happiness. Later on, some demons probably noticed the loophole of this technique. It didn't seem to be as godly as the legends said, and gradually stopped being fooled. As a result, this spell was lost in the later period. When Shinjioli had Shui Mo's memories, even Shinjioli didn't know that there was such a curse technique in this world. Naturally, he didn't think that Shui Mo had paid such a huge price for his resurrection. When he woke up, it was already 10 years later. Long Chuan used his own soul and body as a guide to repair his heart, allowing him to revive. When he woke up, Long Chuan was dead, and more than half of the celestial realm had withered. The devil realm was also in chaos. Some people said that the devil realm's devil lord, his daughter, and the devil lady's servant, Shuailan, had all disappeared. Some said that they died due to internal strife, while others said that the 3 of them went into seclusion to research peerless techniques and could come back at any time. In short, there were all kinds of rumors. At that time, Shinjioli was heartbroken and didn't want to hear any more news about Shui Mo. Naturally, he didn't feel like investigating her whereabouts in the future. After giving the oracle, he fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up, he had Wu Mo by his side. He also forgot everything about Shui Mo as he wished. Naturally, he didn't inquire about who she was in the end, until he recovered all kinds of information about Shui Mo in this life, and heard some fragments of her previous life in Ning Shuima's Sea of Consciousness. Chapter 1567. It was not until he recovered all the information about Shui Yimo in this life and heard some of Ning Xuema's narration of her past life that he finally knew that Shui Yimo had done so much for him in that life. Now that he saw the blood coffin and saw the runes on it, the specific characteristics of this spell emerged in his mind. There was another characteristic of the spell that even the caster did not know about. In order to completely remove the spell, not only did the reincarnated person need to burn the corpse, but the person who was saved also needed to burn the blood coffin. Otherwise, the blood coffin would appear again and again, and the fate of being a loner would not change. He closed his eyes slightly and rubbed his fingers on the blood coffin for a moment. There was a fire on his fingertips, and the blood coffin was instantly set ablaze. The fire soared into the sky, and the air was filled with a faint smell of blood. Mother! Shen Nianma jumped out from Shinjiuli's sleeve and was about to jump into the coffin. He could not bear to let go of his mother's smell. Shinjiuli held it tightly. Nianma, your mother is not here. All that was left behind was her resentment and the power of the curse. But there is mother's smell here. Shen Nianma looked at the coffin eagerly, as if he wanted the coffin to hug him. Shuilan looked at the jumping red stone, with his eyes wide open. His eyesight was very good, so he naturally saw the little guy in the red stone. He looked as if he was struck by lightning. It is Momo's child. Shinjiuli did not answer him. He only put Shen Nianma back into his sleeve. The resentment of the spell was too strong, and Shen Nianma was, after all, a little baby. He was afraid that it would offend him. The coffin was burning there, and there seemed to be endless bitterness and resentment coming from the coffin. It made people have the urge to cry. Shinjiuli's spiritual power was strong, so he could certainly endure it. However, Shen Nianma cried in his sleeve. Mommy, Mommy! Shinjiuli cast a spell on the sleeve, completely isolating the sleeve from the outside world so that the aura would not affect the child. Shuilan stood there and felt his eyes sting. He looked coldly at the burning coffin and laughed coldly. This coffin can't be burned. I've already burned it 8 times, and every time I'm done, it would reappear at the same spot the next day. Shinjiuli remained silent. He stood in place and watched the coffin burn to ashes. He exhaled softly. Shuema, no matter which world you are in now, the fate of being a jinx will no longer follow you. He closed his eyes and sensed the aura in the wind. A moment later, he was disappointed. He had thought that this aura, which contained Shui Yimo's resentment, would automatically search for the original owner. Unexpectedly, this aura only dissipated on the spot, and had no intention of tracking down the original owner. This time, Ning Xuema left decisively. She cut off all ties with him, leaving nothing behind. Such decisiveness was not something an ordinary person could do. After all, he had underestimated her ability. Shen Nianma was listless. It was not easy for him to smell his mother's aura, but it was still useless. This place was a barren land. Shinjiuli did not want to waste any more time here, so he rose into the air. He remembered hearing from Shuilan that Ning Xuema accidentally encountered a black hole after she rose from this place and was sucked into it. Therefore, he wanted to try his luck now. Chapter 1568. Just as he flew into the air, he suddenly sensed something. He turned around abruptly, and his heart sank. In the sky above the coffin, clouds were rapidly gathering. The clouds were white at first, but gradually, they turned into a light red color. Tribulation? At this time, there was no second person who was going through tribulation here. Shinjiuli turned around and flew down. He saw Shuilan standing on the small platform, looking up at the clouds in the sky with his arms wide open. His eyes were filled with fanaticism. Momo, are you here to pick me up? Shuilan, get out of the way. Shinjiuli flew down. This was a tribulation lightning. With Shuilan's current strength, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to deal with it. Although Shinjiuli didn't like this guy, he didn't want anything to happen to him because he used to be someone that Ning Xuema cared about. He waved his sleeves, and a gust of wind flew out. He wanted to slap Shui Lan away first. Unexpectedly, just as the gust of wind flew out, a faint red light enveloped Shui Lan. Shinjiuli's gust of wind hit the red light, causing it to sway. Ha ha ha, it must be Momo who can't bear to see me in pain and came to pick me up. Shui Lan laughed loudly in the red light. He opened his arms and faced the rolling red clouds. Come on. This time, the lightning came quickly and fiercely. Before Shinjiuli could react, the red lightning had already flown down like fire snakes and hit Shui Lan's body. Shui Lan didn't have any intention of resisting. The red light became brighter and brighter, illuminating the ground as if it was a sunset. In the red light, his clothes were already burning. It was as if he was bathing in the red lotus karmic fire. He didn't move at all, and only his two arms desperately tried to resist the red light. Momo, Momo. His voice was pained and slightly trembling. He didn't allow others to block the lightning for him. Shinjiuli had no choice but to watch him stand there and be struck by the red lightning again and again. His whole body was like a burning fireball. In the firelight, Shui Lan finally looked at Shinjiuli. There was a smug look on his face as he said, "Ha ha ha, Momo has finally come to pick me up." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly exploded like a firework, the red clouds dispersed, and the earth returned to normal. It was as if nothing had happened. Shinjiuli's body swayed in the air. Even Shui Lan had disappeared. He thought for a moment, and his heart stirred. He immediately cast a spell to collect the soul. Shui Lan had just been struck and scattered. Even if his soul had been scattered, there must be some scattered souls left at the place where he had been. Even though he didn't like Shui Lan, he was still someone who had a lot to do with Ning Xuema in this world. If he was still alive in this world, Shinjiuli would still feel that there was someone who missed that person as much as he did. At least he wouldn't feel so lonely. After a while, he looked down at his empty fingertips and then at the place where the red clouds had appeared. His fingers clenched again. Nothing. Shui Lan had also disappeared completely. Not even a trace of his soul was left behind. Could it be that he had really been taken away by Ning Xuema? Did they go to the same place? He flew up and circled the place where the red clouds had appeared. He couldn't find any trace of Ning Xuema's aura. He descended in a daze and landed on the stone platform where Shui Lan had been standing. Just now, when the red lightning enveloped Shui Lan along with the stone platform, it only struck him, leaving nothing behind. The stone platform, on the other hand, was safe and sound. Not even a trace of being struck by lightning was left behind. Chapter 1569. Shinjiuli stood on the stone platform for a moment. After the lightning struck, the air here seemed to have been purified. The aura of Shui Lan and the resentment of Shui Mo had disappeared without a trace. He could no longer sense them. They were also struck by lightning and disappeared without a trace. There was not even a trace of their souls left behind. Shinjiuli sat on the platform with his eyes closed. No one knew what he was thinking. His robes flapped in the wind, and his figure was reflected on the mountain wall. He looked more lonely and desolate than he had ever been before. Although he did not react, the baby in his sleeve clearly sensed his mountain-like emotions. He poked his head out of his sleeve and shivered when he sensed his father's cold and despairing emotions. He called out timidly, "Father. Did mother really take away that uncle from just now? Why didn't she take Nianma away? Does she not want us anymore?" His voice was soft and timid. There was a hint of disappointment and confusion. Doesn't mother love Nianma the most? Why didn't she take Nianma away? Nianma has been so obedient. Towards the end, he was already on the verge of tears. Shinjiuli heaved a sigh of relief. He held the stone in his hand and looked at it. "Nianma, it's not that your mother doesn't want you, but she doesn't know who you are. Don't worry. Nianma, the road ahead is probably going to be more difficult. You have to learn to be strong. Shen Nianma looked at him with his eyes wide open. Father. Shen Jiuli rubbed the stone with his finger and let it sway. Nianma, no matter what, you have to remember that you are a man. When a man encounters a problem, crying will not solve it. You have to learn to face it. Shen Jiuli took the opportunity to educate him. This child seemed to be a little too fond of crying. Was it because he was too young? Or was it because of his character? Or was it because he spoiled him too much? He began to think. This child was the only connection between him and her. Now, it was also his support. Naturally, he hoped that this child would be able to support the world in the future. After all, he had never taken care of a child before, and it was his first time taking care of such a small child. Naturally, she did not know that Shen Nianma was much stronger than his peers. After all, he was still too young. Crying was a child's nature. It had nothing to do with gender. Shen Nianma did not fully understand what Gu Shijiu was trying to say, but he did understand half of it. His father did not like to see him cry. Therefore, he nodded seriously in the stone. Nianma, try not to cry in the future. Nianma, you have to be a man in the future. Shen Jiuli heaved a sigh of relief and patted the stone. That's a good boy. But, Mommy used to say that only men who are married can be called men. Those who are not married are called boys. When they are young, they are called boys. Baby boys. Shen Nianma corrected him. Shen Jiuli, after such a conversation between father and son, Shen Jiuli was finally able to control his emotions. He stood up and flew into the sky to check on the spatial door here. It seemed to be a place of turbulence. Various spatial doors appeared from time to time and disappeared in an instant. However, he still did not see the black hole that once swallowed Ning Xuema. Shen Jiuli checked between the spatial doors and calculated something from time to time. He did not know what was going on. Since he came to this desolate planet, some ancient memories came into his mind from time to time. Chapter 1570. Those ancient memories were not related to anything. The main thing was the skills that he used to have. He had forgotten them because of the repeated hibernation, but now there were signs of them gradually recovering. For example, he could now make some deductions based on these unpredictable space doors. He did not know how long he had been calculating in front of these space doors. Suddenly, he turned around and rushed down directly into the turbulent sea on the desolate planet. He calculated the direction very accurately. After rushing down, he found a whirlpool a few hundred meters deep. The whirlpool was huge and very deep. It was like a big black hole that was swallowing the surrounding seawater. Shen Jiuli made up his mind and rushed directly into the whirlpool. He was drawn into the depths of the sea by the whirlpool. Strangely, the whirlpool appeared for more than a minute and then disappeared automatically. The sea returned to its calm state. There was a sea in heaven and earth called the ultimate ruin. The water of the ultimate ruin nourished everything in the world. After a big circle of swaying and rolling, Shen Nianma finally poked his head out of his father's sleeve. After looking around, his eyes widened. The blue water was the sky, and the coral was the ground. The crystal blue water swayed around him. From time to time, there were groups of different kinds of fish that he had never seen before swimming past him. The scenery was unprecedentedly beautiful. He even saw two mermaids swimming over from afar. Di Zun. The two mermaids finally swam in front of the father and son. One of the mermaids called out his father's honorific. Shen Jiuli's eyes fell on the two mermaids. One was a man and the other was a woman. The man was very handsome, and the woman was as charming as a flower. Yi Feng, you are really here. The man and the woman were Yi Feng and Yan Ziyuan, who had died for love. Just as Shen Jiuli speculated, they were reborn as mermaids and were really together. This was another world. Here, one could not feel the storm outside. In the depths of the sea, it was always calm and beautiful. In the depths of the sea water automatically retreated to the sides and became the background. In the snow-white sea sand, there was a huge house made of shells. Yi Feng and Yan Ziyuan were already married, and this shell house was their love nest. When old friends met, it was natural for them to exchange greetings. After Yi Feng pulled Yan Ziyuan to kowtow to the ancestor, he invited him to his shell house. Although the shell house couldn't be said to be magnificent, it had an elegant and warm style, making people feel warm as soon as they entered. After Yi Feng and Yan Ziyuan were reborn in the sinkhole, they were delighted that neither of them had lost their memories. The moment they woke up, they began searching for each other in the sinkhole. Finally, they found each other and naturally joined together. The resources here were plentiful, and they didn't have to worry about food and drink. The two of them lived a very comfortable life here. The only drawback was that they couldn't leave and couldn't see their own kind. This place was a world of its own. Although the sea had seawater rushing out of the ruins of End through a special channel, the two of them were unable to do so. Fortunately, the two of them were not particularly attached to the outside world. As long as they stayed by each other's side, even hell could become heaven. Moreover, the living environment here was much better than hell, so the two of them were very satisfied. Yan Ziyuan was already pregnant, and her slightly protruding belly could be seen in her clothes. Yi Feng understood that the ancestor must have secretly done something for them to be reborn, so he was naturally very grateful to him and Ning Xuema. Chapter 1571. Just as he was regretting that the news of their rebirth could not be spread to the outside world and not let Ning Xuema know, Di Zun coincidentally arrived. Di Zun, I wonder if Miss Ning has been well. Yan Ziyuan was concerned about her good friend and was the first to ask. Shinjiuli lowered his eyes slightly and did not answer her question. He had not come here to reminisce with old friends, nor to talk about his entanglements with Ning Xuema. He only had one purpose for coming here. Yi Feng, there is a passage in the ruins of End that leads to another world. Do you know where it is? Yi Feng pondered for a moment. I have been to every corner of the ruins of End for the past few years. There is indeed a cloud gate in the southeast direction. I don't know what is behind the cloud gate, but the noise is terrifying. I have tried to open the gate, but there should be an ancient enchantment on the gate. I can't open it no matter what. I don't know if the gate leads to another world. Shinjiuli stood up. Bring me there to take a look. It was a jade gate that seemed to support the heavens. The jade was covered in moss after being soaked in seawater. Under the cover of the moss, one could faintly see the complicated decorative patterns on the gate. There were two simple seal characters on the gate, Cloud Gate. The seawater in this place was exceptionally cold. Furthermore, there seemed to be a repulsive force on the Cloud Gate. This repulsive force pushed away anything that approached the Cloud Gate. Yi Feng used a special finger technique to throw a stone at the gate. Before the stone touched the gate, it was reflected back at a speed even faster than Yi Feng's throw. If Yi Feng had not been prepared and pulled Yan Ziyuan away in advance, the stone would have hit him instead. The stone shattered into pieces in the process of being reflected. It was obvious that this gate did not allow any species to approach it. Yi Feng told Shinjiuli about the methods he had used to get close to the gate but had failed. Shinjiuli listened without saying a word. He looked at the Cloud Gate. This Cloud Gate was very familiar to him. Some memories seemed to surge in his mind. These memories were fragmented and could not be connected at once. However, he clearly captured the scene of himself walking out from behind this gate many years ago. Although he had lived in this world for many years, he could not remember his origins. Every time he tried, it was a blur. Later, he set up the oracle that he would sleep once every 900 years and forget everything when he woke up. He did not remember anything about his past. Only after coming to this land of death did his memories seem to slowly recover. From time to time, inexplicable scenes would appear in his mind. For example, this gate. Now, he finally saw the door. It was the same as the one in his memory. However, the door in his memory was brand new. It didn't have the green moss that had grown over tens of thousands of years. With a wave of his sleeve, a hurricane flew toward the door. The seawater rolled back in an instant. The green moss on the gate was wiped away by an invisible hand, revealing the simple and complicated patterns on it. When the surrounding seawater finally calmed down, he could hear a faint whistling sound behind the cloud gate. It was as if there was another world on the other side. Yifeng's gaze fell on Shinjiuli. He could not help but admire him. He had tried all kinds of methods to remove the green moss on the cloud gate, but it was all in vain. But the ancestor had waved his sleeve and removed the green moss on the gate, making it look as clean as if it had taken a bath. Chapter 1572. Yifeng, do you guys want to leave this place? Shinjiuli suddenly turned around and asked Yifeng. Yifeng immediately looked at his wife beside him. Yan Ziyuan and he looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with clear longing. No matter how good a place was, if there were no other people of the same kind, one would be tired after a long period of time. If they could leave this place and return to the Sharkmen clan, it would also be a good idea. Perhaps they would encounter some storms after leaving this place, but who would be willing to spend their entire life in a place like stagnant water? Yifeng nodded solemnly, of course. Does Dizun have a way? Shinjiuli said indifferently, I can send you guys out of this place, but the price is 10 shark pearls. Yifeng was stunned. Shark pearls were actually formed by Sharkman's tears. Ever since he reunited with Yan Ziyuan, he felt like he was soaking in a honey pot every day. When had he ever cried? Sharkman's tear glands were not developed since birth, so he rarely cried. Then should he cry now? But how could he cry in this kind of mood? Yan Ziyuan, who was beside him, was stunned. She looked at her husband and coughed lightly, I have shark pearls. She took out a pouch from her body and poured out a few glowing pearls from the pouch. Every pearl was sparkling and translucent, in the shape of a teardrop. They spun around in her palm. They were the shark pearls, and there were a total of 14 to 15 of them. Yifeng looked at the shark pearls and then looked at her. He was a little nervous. Ziyuan, have you cried before? Was there something that he did not do well enough? He made her cry. Yan Ziyuan sighed softly, I cried a few times in my dreams. Back then, when Yifeng died in her arms, it left a deep impact on her. Although she was reborn as a mermaid, she would still occasionally dream of the scene at night. It made her feel the heartache back then in her dreams, and she would cry. Yifeng should have also thought of this. He couldn't help but hug his wife tightly. Ziyuan, you are pregnant now. Don't think about the past. Yan Ziyuan smiled sweetly and leaned into her husband's arms. Her face was red, I understand. I have already tried my best not to think about it. The two of them had been loving each other for the past few years. They were already used to it. Yifeng hugged his wife and comforted her. He only let her go when he saw that she was truly happy. At this time, Yifeng remembered that the ancestor was still standing beside them. His handsome face was slightly red. He coughed and handed the shark pearls over. Ancestor, these shark pearls should be enough, right? Shinjiuli looked at the shark pearls and didn't take them. The shark pearls that I want must be 5 yang pearls and 5 yin pearls. The yang pearls were the tears of the male shark men. Therefore, Yifeng had to cry for them too. Yifeng rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. He didn't like to cry. Now that he was asked to cry, he really couldn't cry. He was wondering whether he should cut himself twice. The pain might make him cry, but the ancestor spoke again, no matter what kind of shark pearls it is, they must be fresh sharkman's tears of love. Yifeng and Yan Ziyuan looked at each other. It was difficult to make them cry for love. Shinjiuli looked at them and slowly said, I have a way to make both of you cry. As soon as he said this, the two of them were shocked. Yifeng subconsciously pulled Yan Ziyuan behind him and looked at the ancestor cautiously. Ancestor, I don't want Ziyuan to suffer any harm. She is pregnant now. She needs to be happy and can't stand any stimulation. Shinjiuli looked at the way he protected his wife. His eyes slightly darkened and a trace of sadness flashed through them. Chapter 1573. The woman he loved was also pregnant, but he did not stay by her side from the beginning to the end. He even gave her such a big shock. Compared to Yifeng, he was not a qualified husband. Shuima, I hope you will give me the chance to make it up to you. He looked at the two people who were on guard and slightly lowered his eyes. He did not want to upset the two people who loved each other so much. However, in order to see Ning Shuima again and to find Nianma's mother, he had to sacrifice them a little. He did not say much. He just spread his sleeves in the sea, and the sparkling waves suddenly turned into a huge mirror. The clouds in the mirror gradually dispersed, and a figure appeared on it. Yifeng was shocked. He held Yan Ziyuan's hand and subconsciously wanted to take 2 steps back. However, his feet seemed to be fixed by an invisible force, and he could no longer move. Yan Ziyuan, who was beside him, was obviously in the same situation. Both of them could not help but look at the mirror. The mirror showed the ice field and the ice cave. The more Yifeng looked at it, the paler his face became. The images that flashed in the mirror were all the adventures that he and Yan Ziyuan had in the ice field. The images started from when Yan Ziyuan fell into the ice cave, and he sacrificed himself to save her. That year, after Yifeng used the weapon dismemberment technique to kill the monster in the cave, he was also like a lamp that had run out of oil. When he was buried underground with Yan Ziyuan, he was actually already dead. However, he was afraid that Yan Ziyuan would be scared, so he forced himself to control one of his hands to comfort her. When he heard about the arrival of Dizun and the others, he couldn't hold on any longer and his soul scattered. Therefore, he didn't know what happened afterwards. Now, he finally saw it. He saw Yan Ziyuan holding him and walking like a crazy person. He saw her eating the fish that he roasted on the edge of the cliff and singing to him in a low voice. The scenes were almost heartbreaking. Yifeng saw it with his own eyes. His heart was in pain, and his eyes could not help but feel sour. It turned out that Ziyuan had done so much for him back then. It turned out that this was how she died. After he was revived in the ruins of End, it was Yan Ziyuan who found him first. After the two of them met again, Yan Ziyuan threw herself into his arms and hugged his waist tightly. No matter what, she refused to let go and cried her eyes out. She did not mention anything about that past, so this was the first time Yifeng knew about it. Even if he was a man of iron and blood, he couldn't help but be heartbroken when he saw that scene, and tears flowed out drop by drop, turning into mermaid pearls. Yan Ziyuan was a sensitive person. Not long after she started watching, she started to cry. Fortunately, Shinjiuli was more humane. After she poured out the 5 mermaid pearls, he immediately covered her eyes with his sleeve, preventing her from seeing the images on the mirror for the time being. It was not known when the water mirror had disappeared. Yifeng was still immersed in the past and could not come out. It was not until Yan Ziyuan pulled on his sleeve that he came back to his senses. He subconsciously hugged his wife's waist and said, Ziyuan. Before he could finish his sentence, a wave of water suddenly rolled toward them, enveloping them and rushing them in a certain direction. Amidst the roaring sound of the water, they could faintly hear the ancestor's voice, Don't struggle, I'll send you out. Yifeng was stunned, and his heart was filled with joy. He subconsciously hugged his wife gently and protected her in his arms, saying, Ziyuan, don't be afraid, we're going out now. Yan Ziyuan was also happy and surprised. She was also a little upset, saying, Aya, if I knew that we could go out now, I would have brought along the clothes that I made for the child. Chapter 1574. Yan Ziyuan was also surprised and happy. She was also a little annoyed. Aya, if I knew we could go out now, I would have brought along the little clothes I made for the child. No matter, we can make them after we get out. Yi Feng, I'm a little scared. Don't be scared. With me by your side, you don't have to be scared of anything. After we get out, we will return to the mermaid race. I will make you the queen of the shark men. I will let you and the child live the most comfortable life. The waves carried the two of them away, gradually disappearing into the depths of the sea. Shinjiuli lowered his eyes slightly. He had heard the conversation between the two of them, and his heart felt like it was being pricked by needles. If that person was also by his side, he would definitely protect her and let her and the child live the most carefree life. He calmed himself down and slowly withdrew his hand. He turned back to look at the door. He knew that once the door was opened, the ruins of End would undergo an earth-shattering change, no less than a magnitude 10 earthquake. Everything here would change greatly, so he had to send Yi Feng and his wife out. Now that he had no more worries, the next step was to open the door. In truth, he did not know what he would encounter after opening the door, and he did not know whether this door would lead to the space where Ning Xuema was. But he had to try. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, he had to try. He knew clearly that he had walked out from this door many years ago, and then joined this world. Then after he walked through this door, what would he encounter? He had a faint premonition that once he walked through this door, his life would once again undergo a major reversal. His gaze fell on the jade door. The talismans on the jade door were faintly moving, flashing there, as if they were calling out to him. He slowly walked forward. Originally, no living creature could get close to the jade door, but when he walked over, he did not encounter any repelling force. He slowly stretched out his hand and pressed on the jade door. The jade door instantly lit up, and with a series of creaking sounds, 10 holes slowly appeared on the door. The 10 holes were each the size of a shark pearl, and they were arranged in an irregular pattern. Shinjiuli paused, and the 10 shark pearls in his hand shot out consecutively. The way he shot out the shark pearls seemed messy, as if he had shot them out randomly, but in fact, he had arranged them according to a certain array. Every single one of the shark pearls had sunk into the small hole on the door, and they were embedded tightly. As the 10th shark pearl was inserted, the huge jade door suddenly rippled like water. With a boom, the jade door actually disappeared without a trace. Following the disappearance of the jade door, a massive golden wave surged out from the other side of the door and crashed down on Shinjiuli. Shinjiuli did not dodge, instead, he rushed toward the golden wave. His figure was like a lightning bolt, like a bolt of lightning, like a bolt of the door, sliding into the door, he slid. That golden wave seemed to have a boundless destructive force, and when it collided with the seawater on this side, the seawater on this side was like a boiling pot, instantly boiling. Following the impact of the golden wave, the entire ruins of End seemed to have gone crazy. A big squid happened to swim over, and when it was hit by the golden wave, its body instantly exploded, and it disappeared without a trace. The entire ruins of End was turned upside down, and it was no longer as beautiful as it was before. And Shinjiuli could not care about all of this. This golden wave had the power to destroy everything. Chapter 1575. The golden waves had the power to destroy everything. Any physical object could be corroded and destroyed. Any spells that did not belong here could not be used here. Any creature that came into direct contact with it would be melted. After all, Shinjiuli had a layer of wizardry barrier around his body. The golden waves could not melt him, but he felt like he was being cooked alive. The pain was indescribable. Shinjuli's face was pale. He looked down and gritted his teeth to endure the pain. Ning Xuema had experienced the pain before. Now, it was finally his turn. In fact, he could have used his psychokinesis to strengthen himself to reduce the pain, but at this time, he wanted to protect Shin Yanma in his sleeve. Therefore, he used almost all of his psychokinesis around the child to form an airtight layer of protection. Therefore, although Shin Yanma was in the same environment as him, he did not suffer much. He only felt a little dizzy after rolling in his father's sleeve. He clung to the stone wall under him and was a little puzzled. Was his father taking him to ride a roller coaster? It was spinning so fast. However, he liked it. He liked the thrill. He wanted to poke his head out to take a look, but this time, his father hid him very well. He struggled for a long time in his father's sleeve but could not get out. So, he had to give up. He did not know how long he had been going against the golden waves. It was so long that Shin Yanma was about to yawn. Suddenly, he felt a tremor in his body. There was a noise outside. It seemed that a wizardry barrier was broken. Then, he could no longer hide in his sleeve and rolled out. God, how did someone come out of the Golden Sea? Oh, it is still alive. Look, look. There was a voice. The tone was a little strange, but fortunately, Shin Yanma could understand it. He was a little confused after rolling for a while. He shook his head in the stone for a while to get rid of the little birds in front of him. He looked up. The sky was blue, the ground was green, and the sea was golden. His father was lying on the ground, motionless. The stone that he was resting on was in front of his father's chest. When he looked up, he could see his father's delicate chin. What a handsome man. It's a pity that he's a little old. Otherwise, it would be a good gift for our Lord Demon Lord. That's true. Our Lord Demon Lord only likes handsome children under the age of 10. This man is obviously not qualified. This stone is a little strange, forget it, since he's not qualified, I'll just kill him and refine him into pills. This person looks like an immortal, the immortal pills he concocted must be very good. There were 3 men dressed in different clothes standing around his father. They were handsome and looked very young. At this moment, they were looking down at the unconscious Shinjuli. These 3 people obviously didn't take Shinjuli seriously. One of them thrust his sword towards Shinjuli's chest, while the other one reached out to grab the red stone in front of Shinjuli's chest. These 3 people's martial arts were obviously very good. When the sword pierced down, there was a faint sound of wind and thunder. If this sword pierced through, Shinjuli would be pierced through by them. Father! Shin Yanma shouted. The red stone suddenly flashed, and a ball of pink light burst out from the stone to meet the sword that was piercing down. Bang! The pink light collided with the tip of the sword. The sword was slightly tilted, but the falling posture did not change. It was still going to pierce Shinjuli's chest. Father! Shin Yanma was so anxious that he almost rolled over and used the stone to block it. Chapter 1576. Chi. Just as the tip of the sword was about to stab Shinjuli's chest, it was caught between 2 jade-like slender fingers. The assailant was shocked when he saw his lightning-fast sword being caught so easily. He lowered his head to take a look. He saw that Shinjuli had opened his eyes and was looking at him with a pair of icy blue eyes. He raised one hand lazily and pinched the sword with 2 fingers. It was like pinching a paper rattledrum. The attacker could not stab an inch further. The other 2 saw that the situation was not good. They looked at each other and immediately waved their hands. Long swords appeared in their palms. They pointed diagonally and the 2 long swords turned into 7 or 8 short swords. They shot towards Shinjuli's acupoints at the same time. They were obviously not kind people. Their attacks were extremely ruthless. Once they met, they would use a fatal move. They obviously wanted to end the battle quickly. No one could enter the fiery golden sea. Even if a metal object fell in, it would melt in an instant. No living creature had appeared for thousands of years. However, this man was able to come out of the sea and preserve his life. Obviously, his martial arts were very profound. The three of them saw that he was unconscious and wanted to take advantage of the situation. They did not expect that he would wake up at the right time. Since both sides had already started fighting, the three of them felt that since they had already offended this person, they might as well take advantage of the fact that he had just climbed out of the sea and was weak. The three of them rarely joined hands to fight, but once they joined hands, they were a very troublesome opponent. There were 7 or 8 short swords. Each of them was shining with a faint blue light. It was obvious that they were also dipped in poison. As long as Shinjioli was scratched by these short swords, he would lose his life. Shinjioli's eyes flashed slightly. He did not say anything and only used a little strength in his fingers. The man whose sword was caught by Shinjioli suddenly screamed. His body was like a spinning top as he spun above Shinjioli and formed a human shield. The 7 or 8 short swords all pierced into the man's body. The man could only let out half a scream before his body went limp. Shinjioli flicked his finger again, and the man flew away along with his sword, which he would rather die than let go of. Coincidentally, he fell into the fiery gold sea beside him. With a chi sound, the man and his sword were completely melted, without even a splash. The remaining 2 people's faces changed drastically. They obviously knew that they were no match for this person. They no longer cared about anything else and turned to run. They could actually fly. After running 2 steps, they extended their arms and flew up. However, they had only flown 5 or 6 meters when their ribs suddenly went numb. At the same time, they were hit by some small pebbles and fell back down. Their fall was quite standard. They landed on the left and right sides of Shinjioli. At the same time, they fell flat on their faces. 2 of their front teeth were knocked out, and they were in so much pain that they couldn't get up. Shinjioli slowly sat up from the ground. His hair was slightly messy, and his clothes were slightly loose. That Hu Jinhai had almost melted half of his life away, but luckily he survived. He came back to this world alive, a world that seemed strange yet familiar at the same time. His movement when he got up was very casual and lazy, but it was also very smooth. It was almost impossible for people to take their eyes off him. "Father, you are so handsome." Shin Nianma leaned on his shoulder and praised him. When he got up, he almost rolled down from his father's body. Shinjioli held him in his palm and looked down at him. "Boy, you have grown up. You can emit the light of telekinesis." Chapter 1577. What kind of reincarnation was this kid? He was still a fetus, but he could already use his power to protect his father. Although his power was still very weak, it was enough to make Shinjioli happy. This baby was a genius. Shin Nianma blinked. He was very proud of being praised. He proudly raised his small chest and said, "Of course, I am your baby. The angle of your power is not right. Your power is still weak, so it is not suitable for you to fight head-on. You should." Shinjioli took the opportunity to educate him. The 2 people who had fallen on the ground were completely ignored. They looked at the father and son who were talking to each other and were shocked. There was a child hidden in the little stone. It was too strange. This little stone was too magical. If they could offer this little stone to the Devil Master, they would certainly be rewarded greatly. Perhaps they could have a place in the Devil Kingdom. Unfortunately, the 2 people looked regretful at the same time. "Where is this?" Shinjioli sat on a stone and looked down to ask the 2 people who were still lying on the ground. The 2 people looked at each other and answered, "This is the coast of the fiery gold sea." Shinjioli pondered for a moment. He had a slight impression of this name. Suddenly, another name came to his mind. He asked again, "This is the Celestial Devil Continent?" The two people were stunned. They nodded at first, but then shook their heads. A few years ago, this place was called the Celestial Devil Continent. 3 years ago, it changed its name to the Devil Celestial Continent. The Devil Celestial Continent, the Devil Celestial Continent. Shinjioli went through these 4 words in his mind and did not comment. Why did it change its name? Who changed it? The two people looked at each other and then looked at Shinjioli together. Are you not from this continent? Shinjioli flicked his sleeves and said indifferently, "Now I am asking you." He had a kind of arrogance, so the two people did not dare to provoke him. They could only say, "It was our Devil Master who changed it." Devil Master, this name was also vaguely familiar. Shinjioli's heart skipped a beat. He vaguely felt that the owner of this name had something to do with him. Who is your Devil Master? Is it a boy or a girl? Now, the two of them finally understood that Shinjioli was not a person of this world. He didn't even know their famous demon lord. One of them immediately said, "Our Devil Lord is a woman. 3 years ago, she underwent a tribulation and was reborn on this continent. At that time, a red light shone on heaven and earth, moving the rivers and mountains. It alarmed all the immortals, demons, and demons in the world. On the day of her rebirth, tens of thousands of divine birds flew around her, and tens of thousands of beasts prostrated themselves before her." That's right. Chapter 1578. This Devil Lord was the Lord of all devils, also known as the Devil Lord. She could summon clouds and rain with a flip of her hand. On this continent, she didn't need to fight with anyone. Just the pressure of the pure devil chi on her body was enough to make people lower their heads and submit to her. Even the immortals of the celestial world were extremely afraid of her. They didn't dare to act rashly in front of her and were always respectful. She came to this continent for 3 years and finally changed the Devil Realm's position in the 6th Tao. Now, the Devil Realm was the leader of this continent. This Devil Lord didn't hold back and changed the name of the Divine Devil Continent to the Devil Immortal Continent. Now, other than the celestial world that could compete with the Devil Realm, the other worlds could only be respectful to her. Because of her appearance, the entire celestial world was shaken. In order to win her over, the celestial world wanted to marry her. The leader of the celestial world, Jade Cloud Emperor, had proposed to her. However, she said that if she wanted to marry the strongest person in the world. She also wanted to marry someone who was unmarried. As for the origin, no matter if it was the celestial world, the demon realm, or the devil realm, as long as their martial arts were high enough to compete with her, she would consider them as her future husband. Although Jade Cloud Emperor's magic power was high, he already had 2 wives and obviously didn't meet this condition. Everyone in the 6 realms wanted to pull her to their side. All kinds of people gathered in the Devil Realm and participated in the vigorous PK. After a few open and secret competitions, a hermit from the celestial world won. Now, the Devil Lord and this hermit were close and both sides had reached the stage of discussing marriage. As long as the Devil Lord married this hermit, it would mean that the Devil Realm and the celestial world officially joined hands and no longer fought. On this continent, it was mainly these 2 worlds that were fighting fiercely. As long as these 2 worlds stopped fighting, this continent would be much more peaceful. The day after tomorrow was the big day of the Devil Lord and the hermit from the celestial world. All the people in the 6 realms racked their brains to offer strange things as congratulatory gifts, wanting to leave a good impression on the Devil Lord. These 3 people were from the Devil Realm. Their status wasn't high, but they also wanted to give the Devil Lord a presentable gift. These few days, they had been searching everywhere and just happened to pass by here. Coincidentally, they met Shinjioli, who floated out of the fiery gold sea. The reborn demon lord had a strange habit. She liked children, especially beautiful children. The two survivors explained the origin of the Devil Lord's hobby very clearly. Shinjioli listened in silence, then suddenly asked, "What does your Devil Lord look like?" The two of them had seen the Devil Lord from afar before, so they had a good impression of him. They immediately replied, "She's extremely beautiful and likes to wear red." "She looks to be around 13 or 14 years old." Shinjioli's fingertips trembled slightly. Was it her? Could it be her? He paused for a moment. Suddenly, a painting appeared in his hand and he waved it in front of the two people. "Is it like this?" The painting depicted Ning Xiuma's appearance when she was dancing in a red dress. After the two of them took a look, they immediately nodded. "She looks right, but our Devil Master isn't that big. She looks very small, and her hairstyle isn't right." Shinjioli didn't say anything. He closed his eyes slightly. When he opened them again, there seemed to be a clear light in his eyes. He looked up and down at the two people. "What gift do you want to give her?" "A beautiful child." The two people nodded cautiously. "We're looking for such a child, but it's not easy to find one." Chapter 1579. There were many beautiful children on this continent, but there were very few who could meet the Devil Lord's requirements. Shinjioli's figure turned slightly, and a white light flashed. The tall and handsome man disappeared, and standing in the same place was an extremely beautiful little boy. He had delicate skin, long eyelashes, and slightly raised corners of his eyes. His eyes were like the sea, and he was wearing a dazzling white robe. His whole person seemed to be made of snow. The two people stared at the little boy dumbfoundedly. You. Although Shinjioli was small, his aura was not small. He stood there and smiled slightly. Under this smile, it was as if all the flowers in the world had bloomed. "Give me to her." The two people's expressions were as if a pie had suddenly fallen from the sky and hit their heads. They were dizzy and disoriented. "This, you want to give her this gift?" They suddenly thought of something and immediately took a step back. "Do you want to harm our Devil Lord?" "Let us tell you, you better give up on this idea. Our Devil Lord is the only master on this continent, and no one can hurt her. If you dare to harm her, you will be hunted down by all the demons in the Devil Realm." Shinjioli's eyes flashed. He flicked his sleeves and said lightly, "Don't worry, your Devil Lord is so powerful. How can I plot against her? I am just curious about her. So I want to go and see." But the two people were still a little uncertain. Shinjioli sighed softly. He waved his sleeves, and the sword turned into two. The cold sword points were pointed at the necks of the two people. "Do you have any objections?" Their lives were hanging under the sword. How could the two people dare not to agree? He had no choice but to agree. However, they were still a little worried. "You really won't harm our Devil Lord?" Shinjioli lowered his sleeves, lowered his eyes, and only replied with two words, "Of course." The two people looked at each other again. If they did not agree now, they would probably die. It would be better to offer him to the Devil Lord. After all, the Devil Lord had many capable people on his side. No matter how high this person's martial arts was, he was just one person. He wouldn't be able to do much. The two of them had already made up their minds, so they happily agreed. They whistled into the air. A moment later, a gorgeous carriage descended from the sky and landed in front of Shinjioli. "Please." Shinjioli wasn't polite. He turned around and boarded the carriage. As soon as he sat down, a series of rustling sounds came from outside. The originally wooden carriage was suddenly surrounded by iron plates, sealing the entire carriage tightly. The iron plates also had a variety of flowing charms, which looked rather strange and gaudy. Outside the carriage came the laughter of the two people. "Sorry, since you insist on making this gift, then you have to follow our procedures. This carriage is specially made, and it can seal all the power in your body. If you obediently make the gift, then it will be fine. If you use your power to resist, this carriage will become a purgatory of fire, and your whole body will be burned. Don't blame us for not reminding you. Shinjoli's expression didn't change at all. He just used a small cleaning spell to clean the carriage, and then sat down with peace of mind. His sleeves trembled, and the little red stone poked its head out. Suddenly, it saw Shinjoli's current appearance. Shin Nianma's whole body was stunned. He was stunned for a moment, and then jumped out 3 words, brother. Brother? Shinjoli was speechless. Chapter 1580. Subconsciously, he wanted to correct him. However, on second thought, he realized that it was indeed inappropriate for Shin Nianma to address him as father in his current state. Nianma, I am your father. Do you want to see your mother? Yes. If you want to see your mother, then listen to father obediently and do as father instructs. I will listen to you, father. But, father, you look like my older brother. Father, when Nianma is born, can you play with me like this? Shin Nianma suddenly became excited. Since he had his own consciousness, he had always been with his father. He had only seen children running on the street, but he had never played with them. Children always like to play with people of the same age, and Shin Nianma was no exception. He felt that his father looked more amiable. Shinjoli was speechless. His eyes flashed slightly, and he slowly said, Nianma, do you want to play with children of the same age? Shin Nianma nodded. Yes. Shinjoli smiled slightly. When you see your mother, can you ask her to give birth to a little brother or sister for you? They will play with you every day. Shin Nianma's eyes lit up. Okay. Shinjoli patted the little stone. Alright, Nianma, it is time for you to practice. As expected, Shin Nianma went to practice excitedly. Shinjoli put him back into his sleeve and then closed his eyes slightly to meditate. He was badly injured in the Golden Fire Sea, and his spiritual power was reduced by more than half. It would probably be very disadvantageous for him in the future. He had to race against time to recover. Shuema, it is good that you are still alive. Shuema, I wonder how you will react when you see us. Are you going to be engaged? The corners of his lips twitched slightly. Since he was here, how could he allow her to get engaged to someone else? Not to mention an engagement, even if she was going to get married, he would still take her back. When will the moon be bright? With a cup of wine in my hand, I ask the sky. I wonder what year it is in the palace in the sky. The sound of a zither could be heard coming from the depths of the garden. The wind blew the falling flowers, and the water flowed like a spring. It was very pleasant to the ears. In a boundless garden, all kinds of flowers were in full bloom. There were colorful butterflies fluttering among them, and the garden was filled with spring. There were exotic flowers and plants in the garden, as well as pavilions and terraces, as well as small bridges and flowing water. In a small pavilion sat a man in a green robe. That man had a rare elegance. His sky-blue robe dragged on the ground, and the wind blew his robe and long sleeves. In front of him was a chard-tailed parasol tree zither. His eyes were lowered, and his 10 fingers danced on the zither. Strands of zither music flew out from his fingertips, out of the gazebo, and into an open space not far away. In the open space, there was an antique swing, and on the swing sat a young girl in red. She looked to be 12 or 13 years old. Her eyebrows were picturesque, and her black hair hung down. The fringe in front of her forehead almost covered her eyebrows. Her eyes were slightly lowered, and her long eyelashes covered her eyelids like crow feathers. Under the sunlight, she was as quiet as a butterfly. Half of her body was leaning on the swing, as if she was sleeping or listening to the zither. She looked very comfortable. Not far from this open space, there was a meadow. On the meadow, there were a few children playing there. There were girls and boys, and each of them had delicate features and were as cute as jade. They were either chasing each other or playing around. It looked very harmonious and beautiful. The zither music stopped, and the man in green focused his gaze on the young girl. His gaze was gentle. Amo. Chapter 1581. The girl slowly opened her eyes. Her eyes were red like gems. They were so deep that no one could see through them, but at the same time, they were so clear that one could see through her emotions. Every human being had 7 emotions and 6 desires. They could be happy, sad, or angry, but she was calm, absolutely calm. She looked lazy. Her gem-like eyes fell on the man. What can I do for you? The man sighed. Mo, that song just now was very beautiful. I've never heard of it before. Do you think there's anything wrong with it? Mo stretched lazily. It's pretty good. I had a good night's sleep. The man was speechless. Did she think his song was a lullaby? Mo, you wrote this song, so it must be your work. I didn't write this song. Mo swung back and forth on the swing. Her fluttering red dress was like a fluttering butterfly. She looked lazy as usual. The man was startled. It wasn't you. Mo tilted her head and looked at him. She smiled, revealing 2 deep dimples on her cheeks. Do you still think it's nice? Her smile was almost malicious, with a hint of mockery. It was as if she had seen through everything and didn't care about it. The man smiled. It doesn't matter if this song was made by you or not, it's still nice to listen to. Do you have any other songs? Why don't you teach me one? Mo leaned her head on the swing and yawned. I'm tired today. I'll teach you tomorrow. You can leave by yourself. Turn left at the exit. I won't see you out. She was rudely chasing him away. The man's eyes flickered. He slowly walked forward and gently pushed the swing for her. Come, I'll swing it for you. You can rest a little. Mo didn't chase him away this time. She closed her eyes and continued to rest. The spring breeze warmed the air, and the fragrance of flowers and trees drifted in the air. The handsome man and beautiful woman were quite harmonious. The man gently swung her with just the right amount of strength. Mo, do you like children a lot? The man's gaze fell on the playful children. There were immortals and devils among the children, and there were even 2 little demons that had just cultivated into human form. The children of the immortal, devil, and demon realms were playing together like ordinary children. Mo didn't say anything. He just smiled like an innocent child. She liked the world of children. The world of children was simple and carefree. If possible, she wanted to turn everyone in the world into children. Mo, let's have a few kids after we get married, okay? The man put his hand on her shoulder. Not good. Mo answered without hesitation. She jumped off the swing. Yi Tianli, you should go. You don't have to come tomorrow. Yi Tianli raised his eyebrows. Mo, however, Mo no longer looked at him and only left him a sentence. Don't worry, as long as you're still the strongest person in the immortal world, I will be engaged to you in the future. Yi Tianli froze slightly and blurted out, then, what if I'm not the strongest? Mo didn't even turn her head. I will only marry the strongest. Yi Tianli's fingers slowly clenched in his sleeves. In other words, she didn't want to marry him because of him, but because of his identity as the strongest person. He had been by her side for so long, but she still couldn't move her heart. Mo, have you ever liked me? Like? What is it? Mo finally turned her head. She tilted her head slightly. She looked innocent, but her eyes were as calm as flowing water. I have never known what love is. Chapter 1582. Yi Tianli froze slightly. He looked down at his hands. His fingers were long and slender like jade. They were hands that could make the entire celestial world submit to them. These hands could play the zither, paint, and use extremely profound techniques. His hands alone could make countless fairies in the celestial world mesmerized. Not to mention, he also had an incomparably handsome face and incomparably powerful magical power. With this, no matter where he went, he could get the favor of countless fairies. No matter who he liked, he could get her. Of course, he was proud by nature and was not a casual person. So even though he was surrounded by bees and saucers, he had never been moved by any woman. As for Amo, at first, it was just a kind of pride. Amo said that she wanted to marry the strongest. He just wanted to prove that he was the strongest. He did not really want to marry this demon lord. But ever since he saw her, he was more and more attracted to her. She had a special temperament that made people unable to take their eyes off her. He had seen many cold fairies, but none of them had the kind of indifferent coldness that came from her bones. She also knew how to smile, especially when she tilted her head and smiled at you. It was indescribably flirtatious and indescribably evil. That pair of eyes seemed to be able to hook souls. A slight turn could make people fall head over heels for her. She seemed to have feelings, but in fact, she was emotionless. The depths of her eyes were like a pool of water that could not be stirred up. The more time they spent together, the more he wanted her to stare at him. He wanted to see her mesmerized look. But, he could not do it at the moment. His lips curled up slightly. He felt that he was a bit cheap. So many women wanted to get a glimpse of him, but he was more and more attracted to an almost heartless witch. He raised his head and looked at her back. The bright red clothes were like fire under the sun. It was such a bright color, but it gave people the feeling that she was in hell. That fire was the red lotus hellfire. He smiled gently. It's okay. Men were born to like challenges. He did not believe that after they got married in the future, he would not be able to get her heart after a long time. Demon Lord, the Lord of all demons, the pure demon born by heaven and earth, the ancestor of demons. No one knew how long she had existed in this world. Even the oldest deity in the immortal world didn't know when she had appeared. Before her rebirth, she was extremely mysterious. It was said that she had tens of thousands of incarnations, male, female, old, and young. Therefore, no one in the entire God's Demons continent knew her true appearance. They only knew that she was the spiritual leader of the demon realm. Once she made a move, the world would be turned upside down. It was a headache for many immortals. In the entire mythical infernal continent, it seemed that only that one divine power could truly compete with her. The God's Demons continent, was named after the existence of these two people. The celestial realm had the support of the gods, while the devil realm had the devil lord as its leader. Neither of the celestial realm nor the devil realm was willing to submit to the other. It was said that tens of thousands of years ago, the celestial realm and the devil realm were turned upside down during the war of gods and devils. The entire 6 realms suffered a calamity, and countless beings in the 6 realms became cannon fodder in that war. Whether it was the immortal realm or the devil realm, both suffered heavy losses in that battle. Almost all of the immortal realm and devil realm were wiped out. Now, there were only a few survivors. Even he, Yi Tianli, was born after that battle. He only knew about the tragedy of that battle from a few surviving old immortals. He knew that the devil lord was called Amo. He had always imagined her to be a 3-headed, 6-armed figure. Chapter 1583. He had always imagined her as someone with 3 heads and 6 arms. He never thought that her real appearance was a girl who looked like a teenager. Tens of thousands of years ago, she went missing with that god in the demon god continent. The immortals and demons thought that she and that god had disappeared in that battle. They never thought that she would be reborn, now that the demon had returned, what about the equally mysterious god? Would he return? Yi Tianli sighed. He felt that he was overthinking. The rebirth of the demon lord was already an accident. How could that god be reborn as well? When the demon lord was reborn, the world shook and there were anomalies in the 6 realms. If that god was reborn, the anomalies in the 6 realms would be even stronger. Now that there were no anomalies in the 6 realms, he guessed that God had really disappeared and would never return. Besides, deep in his heart, he did not want that god to be reborn. The demon god and the demon god were natural enemies. If they did not agree and fought on this continent, the 6 realms would be reshuffled. Fortunately, he had been with Amo for so long and did not see her make any big moves. She seemed to be too lazy to make any big moves. Her life was actually very simple. Since she won a good territory for the demon realm, she seemed to have lived a life of seclusion. She swung on the swing every day and played with the children. Her temperament was also like a child. As long as you did not provoke her, she was not difficult to get along with. In ancient legends, the demon lord was very aggressive. Now, it seemed that she had changed. Yi Tianli looked up at the sky. The sun was bright and the breeze was blowing. Perhaps, the day after tomorrow would also be a sunny day. After the day after tomorrow, she would definitely be his fiancée. He could then stay here for a long time. He looked at Amo again. She was sitting on a stone bench, looking at the group of children with her head tilted. No one could figure out what she was thinking. Yi Tianli's heart suddenly felt warm. If these children were his and her future children, then this scene seemed to be very heartwarming. He was looking forward to it. Amo did not know why, but she was a little restless today. This was a scene that she had never experienced since she was reborn in this continent. She did everything according to her heart. No matter what she was happy about, she would do it. If she was unhappy, she would destroy it. No one could make things difficult for her, so she had been living a carefree and comfortable life. She was the devil master, and all the devils in this world would have an innate fear when they saw her. According to what people said, demons were born to live in a dark and gloomy world, but she didn't like it. 3 years ago, she was reborn in this world, and the demons welcomed her back to the demon world with joy. She only stayed there for 2 days, and she didn't like it. She didn't like the sky that was always dark, she didn't like the cold barren hills and turbulent waters, she didn't like the dark rivers that were always flowing with blood, she didn't like anything in the devil world. Therefore, she decided to barge into the celestial world and negotiate with the people there to divide the territory. No leader of the earth realm was willing to give up their territory, and the celestial emperor of the celestial world was naturally unwilling as well. However, this demon lord was too powerful. Her strength was too terrifying. Not only could she defeat all the immortals in the immortal world, she also knew the art of war. Since the celestial world did not give her any land, she immediately led her troops to fight. After suffering a few losses, the immortal world finally understood that if they were to fight against this demon lord, not only would they have to pay a huge price and lose their immortal soldiers and immortal generals, they would also not be able to win. Chapter 1584. If they didn't agree to give her a piece of land, all the lands in the immortal realm would be lost. Thus, after half a year of fighting, the celestial emperor made a prompt decision to give the demon realm a large piece of land. He gave 2 of the 33 heavens to the demon realm. The spiritual energy in these 2 heavens was extremely abundant. It was a place where flowers bloomed in the warmth of spring, and where all living things grew and thrived. To cultivators, this was a paradise for immortals. However, demons were only sensitive to demonic chi. The denser the demonic chi, the faster they could cultivate. Rich spiritual energy was a blessing to immortals, but to demons, it was no less than a disaster. The celestial emperor didn't have good intentions when he gave such a piece of land to the demon realm. He was waiting for the demon realm to decline, waiting for them to return these two lands. But he didn't expect that after Amo led the demons to occupy these two heavens, she used some unknown method to convert the spiritual energy into demonic chi. The demons lived very comfortably in this land, and naturally had no intention of returning it. Fortunately, Amo seemed to be satisfied after occupying these two heavens, and didn't make any further requests. She occupied one of the heavens to herself, and her daily life was very simple and comfortable. This made everyone in the immortal realm feel more at ease. In fact, the celestial emperor still hoped that the supreme divinity could return. That way, the immortal realm would be confident again, and they wouldn't have to act according to the demon lord's wishes like now. If necessary, he also wanted to drive the devils of the devil realm back to their former barren lands. It was a pity that he didn't have the strength to contend with the demon lord, if only the supreme divinity could return. Of course, this was what the highest echelons of the immortal realm thought. For ordinary immortals, this was actually quite good. It was better for immortals and demons to coexist peacefully than always fighting. Although the immortal and demon realms were turbulent internally, at least they could maintain peace on the surface. Amo seemed to know this, but also didn't. She only followed her heart. If she liked something, she would do it. If she didn't like it, even if the sky fell and the earth cracked, it had nothing to do with her. She didn't know how long she could be satisfied with her current life. Life was too long, too long. Who could be satisfied with and like something for a long time? It was enough for her to like it now. After her rebirth this time, she did not remember anything from before the ancient times. She only remembered her own identity. However, those past events were already like smoke. The past was the past. So what if he knew? So what if he didn't know? It had nothing to do with her current life. She sat there and lazily watched the children play for a while. She felt a little uneasy, as if something unexpected was about to happen. She sat there and tried to figure it out, but to no avail. He stretched again. Forget it. Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. Anyway, she was a little bored now. If something could happen, it might be able to relieve her loneliness. She looked at the children playing around. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt a little confused. She felt that it was a little noisy. She turned around and left the group of playful children. Once again, she walked under the swing and fluttered onto it, swinging lazily. She was a little sleepy, but for some reason, she couldn't fall asleep even if she closed her eyes. This feeling was not good. She sighed. If she knew this would happen, she would not have driven Yi Tianli away. At the very least, his music had a hypnotic effect. Chapter 1585. What a huge palace! It was unknown how many miles it had. Even if one looked down from the sky, one would not be able to see the edge. Looking in from the outside, one could only see layers of pavilions extending inwards. The pavilions were connected to the sky, and the jade trees were like clouds. Colorful haze floated in the air from time to time. From afar, it looked like it was floating in the clouds. Even the jade lake in the sky might not be able to compare to this, let alone a palace in the human world. There were two simple words on the tall lintel, Mo Palace. Because the day after tomorrow was the big day of the engagement between the Devil Lord and the celestial world hermit Yi Tianli, the outside of Mo Palace was very busy. Some people from the 6 paths who were further away had already arrived in advance with all kinds of strange gifts. Outside Mo Palace, there were demons in charge of receiving guests. After checking all the people, they were brought into Mo Palace. At the entrance of Mo Palace, there were all kinds of carriages. These carriages were either luxurious, simple, or elegant. Obviously, the owners of each carriage were very extraordinary. Of course, the most important people in the 6 paths would not come in advance. Firstly, they wanted to maintain their noble status. Secondly, they all had extraordinary skills and could travel thousands of miles in an instant. It would not be too late for them to come on the day itself. No one in the 6 paths, no matter which world they were from, wanted to bump into the biggest bosses when they were giving gifts. If the gifts were better than those bosses would be unhappy. If the gifts were worse than theirs, it would be embarrassing. Therefore, it was better to come early and give gifts in advance. Everyone would be happier. Everyone on this continent knew that the Devil Lord liked children, especially beautiful children. Therefore, there were a lot of people giving these kinds of gifts this time. Mo Palace naturally had a place to receive these kinds of special gifts. They even opened up a new passage to Mo Palace for these gifts. At the entrance of this passage, there were already several carriages responsible for delivering these gifts. Although the style of each carriage was not the same, each carriage was extremely exquisite. Because the manager of Mo Palace, who received these gifts, said that only the most exquisite carriages were worthy of the most exquisite children, when it was close to noon, another carriage rushed over and stopped at the outermost area of the entrance. Manager Mo Palace looked at the carriage and frowned. That carriage looked more ordinary and shabby than the other carriages. Especially the 2 men driving the carriage. Although their clothes were still neat and tidy, their faces were bruised and swollen, as if they had just been beaten up. Palace manager Mo looked down on them and didn't even have the intention to welcome them. He only gestured to the 2 manservants beside him to receive them. As the saying goes, the king of hell is easy to meet, but the little ghosts are hard to deal with. The higher the rank of an official, the harder it would be for his attendants to serve him, and the higher his status would be. Now, in the 6 realms, the Devil Master's status was the highest. Even the guards outside her palace were more valuable and had a higher status than ordinary people. Therefore, even though the 2 of them were rather famous in the Devil realm, they were still extremely respectful to the 2 manservants from Mo Palace. They bowed their heads and explained their intentions. Naturally, the main point was how rare and precious their gift was. The 2 servants glanced at the carriage. They were more knowledgeable. Why is there a lock on the carriage? Is the gift inside very difficult to deal with? The 2 of them paused and coughed. It is indeed a little difficult. We even suffered a little in order to catch him. However, the goods inside are definitely rare. We've lived for so long, but we've never seen anything so beautiful. The Devil Master will definitely be happy to see it. Chapter 1586. The 2 servants nodded slightly. Very good. Then open the carriage. Let him come down. We want to take a look first. Mo Palace isn't a place that just any Tom, Dick, or Harry can enter. The 2 servants looked at each other and then walked out of the carriage. They asked softly, the one inside, could you please come down and let us take a look first? They added, the same goes for everyone else. We're not targeting you specifically. The 2 servants widened their eyes and looked at the carriage as if they were looking at a western scenery. To be honest, although these children who were sent here as gifts were all good-looking, most of them were forced to come here. The people who sent them here didn't even ask for their opinions. After arriving here, as long as the people of Mo Palace asked to inspect the goods, these children would be taken out of the carriage like goods. This was the first time they had seen something like this. The 2 servants who sent the gifts seemed to be a little afraid of the child inside. Okay. Only one word came out of the carriage. It was clearly a child's clear and melodious voice, but it carried a clear and cold air like the snow on the plateau. The 2 servants immediately opened the carriage door as if they had been granted amnesty. Everyone only saw a blur in front of their eyes. A boy in white had already landed on the ground. The moment he landed, everyone held their breaths. So beautiful. So cold. The boy looked to be 6 or 7 years old. He had butterfly-like eyelashes and snow-white skin. His eyes were like rippling autumn waters, and his lips were like light red peonies. His hair was as black as ink and draped over his shoulders. His white robe was like a cloud that flipped around his body. He stood there, setting off everyone around him as if they were made of mud and stone. He also overshadowed the originally beautiful children who had just alighted from the other carriages. The moment he got out of the car, almost everyone gasped in shock. Supervisor Mo Palace had just received a beautiful girl and was about to personally send her into Mo Palace. However, he felt that the surrounding atmosphere was not right and immediately looked over. Then, he opened his eyes wide. Peerless. Peerless. This was simply unprecedented peerless. Compared to this child, all the children who had been sent to the palace added together weren't as good-looking as this child. Palace manager Mo was so excited that his hands were practically shaking. He strode over and sized up the white-clothed boy a few times. His instincts told him that not only was this child shockingly beautiful, even the faint aura on his body was extremely shocking. "Child, what's your name? Where are you from?" Palace supervisor Mo asked warmly. "Jiuzun." The child only replied with 2 words. "Aya." Even her voice is so pleasant to listen to. This was simply too perfect. Although he only mentioned his name and not his background, palace manager Mo didn't take it to heart. He was just a child. No matter how mysterious he was, what could he do? Such a peerless demon master would definitely be happy to see him. Steward Mo Gong did not ask any more questions. He said directly, "Little 9 Supremes, you've been selected. Come with me." He liked this child so much that he couldn't help but reach out to hold his hand to show his affection. However, the boy's eyes flashed slightly and he took half a step back, causing him to grab the air. Palace manager Mo was taken aback. He glanced at the child again and felt that this child didn't know how to appreciate favors. She wanted to reprimand him, but when she saw his beautiful face, she decided against it. Forget it, he's just a kid. There's no need to be calculative. After all, the 2 people who had sent Shinjioli here were still worried, so they used a sound transmission technique to send a message to Chief Manager Mo Gong. Chapter 1587. The 2 people who had sent Shinjioli here were still worried, so they used telepathy to send a message to Palace Manager Mo, vaguely saying that the child's powers were not low, and that it would be better to investigate thoroughly before sending him to the Devil Lord. Palace Manager Mo's lips curled into a smile, not taking it to heart at all. Currently, there was no match for the Devil Lord in the entire continent of gods and demons, nor could they plot against him. No matter how impressive this child was, he was only a genius. What could he do? Children of such quality were too rare. Palace manager Mo was in a good mood and rewarded the 2 people handsomely. Then, he personally brought the selected children in. There were a total of 8 children selected this time, 3 girls and 5 boys. Naturally, all of them were stunning beauties, especially the 3 girls, who were practically a ball of powder. Originally, these children each had their own beauty, and it was hard to tell who was better. However, ever since Jiuzun joined them, he was like a phoenix flying into a flock of chickens, stealing the limelight of all the children even though he hadn't even spoken a word. The other children all had different reactions. The 3 girls were still fine, but the other 4 boys simply had the heart to scratch his face to pieces. The 3 girls couldn't help but want to get closer to him, to surround him. Children at this age were still ignorant, and liked to be straightforward no matter what they said or did. Their likes were written all over their faces, and their dislikes were also written all over their faces. One of the bolder girls even ran to his side, looking at him with a pair of big, adorable eyes. "Jiuzun, I'll marry you when I grow up, okay? I want to be your wife." Palace manager Mo, who was leading the way, was shocked by her words. He turned back to look at Jiuzun, wanting to see his reaction. Unexpectedly, the little fellow was so cool. He acted as if he hadn't heard anything, and only cared about walking. The girl was a feisty one. Naturally, she wasn't satisfied that her confession didn't get a response. She immediately chased after him, reaching out to pull Jiao Zun's hand, wanting to act coy. Okay. She didn't touch Jiao Zun's hand, because her hand touched an invisible barrier halfway through. As if struck by lightning, she retracted her hand abruptly. It was probably the first time the girl had encountered such a huge setback, for she burst into tears. Palace Chief Eunuch Mo didn't pay any attention to him, because the Demon Master had once said that there was no need to control the children too much. It was fine to just let them grow up freely. Moreover, the Devil Lord liked the new and hated the old. Most of the children who entered the palace stayed in Mo Palace for half a year before being sent away. Mo Palace was huge, so huge that it seemed to have no end. The path these children were on was obviously special, as it led directly to the depths of Mo Palace. The child called Jiao Zun was naturally Shinjiuli. He thought that his gift would be unique, but he didn't expect to enter the palace with this bunch of little radishes. This scene was rather similar to the emperor choosing a candidate, and she was the candidate. Shinjiuli had never thought that he would be reduced to such a state one day. Thinking about it, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He followed Palace Steward Mo inside, taking in the surrounding scenery along the way. The scenery here was very beautiful, and every brick and tile was ingenious. Some places gave him a vague feeling of familiarity. He raised his eyes and looked into the depths of the building. What would she look like after her rebirth? Would she still remember him? Passing through many courtyards and winding corridors, Palace Chief Eunuch Mo led them for who knew how long before he finally stopped in front of a large garden. He had the children wait at the door while he went in to report. Chapter 1588. The group of children was still quite nervous. After all, they did not know what would happen to them after they were sent in as gifts. The more they did not know, the more afraid they were. Some of the children even guessed that there were monsters hiding inside and that they were sent in to be fed to the monsters. Shinjiuli was silent. His hearing was amazing, and he could already hear the children playing inside. However, he did not hear her. "Little brother, will we be eaten?" The little girl who was crying earlier had already stopped crying. At this moment, she came to talk to Shinjiuli again. Shinjiuli was too lazy to pay attention to the little kid. He took 2 steps to the side. He had a kind of aura that kept people away. The children did not dare to do anything to him. He was so unsociable, so the children looked at each other and isolated him. After a while, the general manager came back. However, the news he brought back made Shinjiuli look down. He looked a little strange. He passed the Devil Lord's order. The Devil Lord said that she was not interested in children recently, so the children who were sent here today were to be returned. She did not need to see them. After the oral order was passed, the group of children had different reactions. They were happy and sad. No one dared to disobey the Devil Lord's order. Therefore, although the general manager felt regretful, he still led the group of children out. When the general manager led the group of children to the gate of the Mo Palace, he inadvertently looked back and was suddenly stunned. There were 7 children left behind. The prettiest and most stunning child had disappeared. He asked the other children, and they seemed to have just realized that the child was missing. They were even more confused than him. The general manager's heart sank. His kung fu was one of the best in the Devil Kingdom. Even if a mosquito flew past him, he could instantly distinguish the gender of the mosquito. Now that a child was missing, he only realized it now. That child was indeed not simple. The general manager did not care about anything else. He handed the remaining 7 children to another servant and turned back to look for the child himself. "Father, is mommy really here?" Shin Yanma had been holding back for a long time. Now, he finally had the time to ask. There should be. Shin Jiuli replied with 3 words. He had already arrived at the big garden. But why doesn't mommy want to see us? Doesn't she miss us? Shin Yanma felt wronged. Shin Jiuli said, it doesn't matter. If she doesn't want to see us, we can go see her. He looked at the gate of the garden and paused for a moment. There was a barrier around the garden. Moreover, it was the kind of enchantment with extremely strong magic power. If one did not have a special identity, they would not be able to enter and exit the gate at will. His gaze fell on the barrier, and there seemed to be waves in the depths of his eyes. With such a strong enchantment, it seemed that her martial arts were strong enough, which made him feel quite gratified. The only thing that made him unhappy was that with his current power, it was not impossible for him to forcefully break the barrier, but it would also alarm the people in the garden. If he scared her away, suddenly, he seemed to have sensed something. He turned around and saw the chief steward dashing over. His eyes flickered, but he didn't do anything. When the steward saw him, he heaved a sigh of relief. Little ancestor, who allowed you to come back on your own? She raised her hand and was about to tug at his sleeve and leave. Shinjioli stepped back smoothly, and the steward grabbed nothing. I want to see the devil master. Shinjioli said. Chapter 1589. The steward was stunned for a moment. He had secretly used the best martial arts of the devil realm just now. Even a valiant general would not be able to escape from his grasp. He did not expect that this child would be able to dodge it so easily. His expression turned serious as he asked, "Who are you?" The child's martial arts were beyond his expectations. Shinjioli pursed his lips and said, I'm an old friend of hers. Tell her my name and she'll see me. The steward laughed. Little guy, I mentioned your name in front of the devil master just now. She didn't want to see you at all. No one can disobey the devil master's orders. I advise you to leave obediently. Shinjioli's eyes seemed to flash with a dark light. So, she didn't want to see these children because of him? It seemed like she still remembered him. He wasn't afraid that she wouldn't see him or fall out with him. He was only afraid that she would completely forget about him and never remember him again. All right. Don't dawdle here. Hurry up and leave. If you don't leave now, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave. The steward threatened. He was a devil and originally had no feelings for children. However, the devil master had ordered that no one was allowed to harm children. Anyone who disobeyed would be severely punished. Therefore, although the steward was very angry with Shinjioli for being disobedient, he still didn't dare to do anything to him. He wanted to scare him away first. There are ferocious beasts in Mo Palace that eat children. If you don't leave now, I'll feed you to the ferocious beasts. Shinjioli lowered his eyes slightly. All right, I'll leave. The steward finally let out a sigh of relief. Shinjioli said again, however, I'd like to ask the steward to pass something to the devil master for me. What can a child like you pass something to her? The steward asked impatiently. Shinjioli's sleeve drooped and an egg-sized red stone appeared in his palm. This is it. The steward was stunned. A stone fetus? There was nothing strange about the appearance of the red stone. The only strange thing was that there was a small baby inside the stone. The baby was still alive, swimming around like a fish. This was indeed a rare item. The steward took the red stone and examined it in his palm. The baby in the red stone opened his eyes and looked at Shinjioli accusingly. He didn't believe that his father would sell him out like this. The general manager sensed the stone and didn't feel any danger from it. After thinking for a while, he realized that his lord devil liked children. If he gave this rare stone fetus to her, she might really like it, thus, he nodded and kept the rock. He then called for a manservant to bring the little 9 supremes out. Seeing that Shinjioli had indeed left with the manservant, he turned around and entered the garden. The enchantment outside the garden recognized people. Unless he personally led the way, no one would be able to enter without making a sound. Lord Devil Master. The steward bowed respectfully under the swing. Mo didn't even open her eyes. She said indifferently, "What are you doing here again?" The steward raised the red stone above his head. "Lord Devil Master, someone sent such a rare item. This subordinate guesses that Lord Devil Master might like it, so I boldly offer it to you." Mo lazily opened her eyes. When her gaze landed on the stone, her pupils suddenly shrank. She slowly got up from the swing and raised her hand. A faint red light flashed and the red stone was already in her palm. Chapter 1590. She looked down at the baby in the stone, and the baby in the stone was also looking at her with his eyes wide open. Usually, a newborn baby would be wrinkled and would not be considered good-looking. However, this baby was different. His facial features were already very delicate, especially his pair of big and watery eyes. Being stared at by such a pair of eyes, even a heart of stone would instantly melt into a puddle of water. The baby was almost leaning on the stone wall to look at her. His eyes were getting bigger and bigger, and his little mouth was flattened again and again. He seemed to be getting more and more aggrieved. His expression made Mo inexplicably nervous. Just as she was about to say something, the baby suddenly cried, "Mommy." Mo's hand trembled. The small stone in her hand fell to the ground. Her expression changed slightly. She waved her sleeve and caught the small stone before it fell to the ground. She was about to pick it up. Suddenly she heard the sound of something tearing. Half of her sleeve was soaked through. Oh no! She did not expect the small stone to be so fragile. It broke before it fell to the ground, and the beautiful baby in it. She turned her sleeve and rolled the broken stone up to see if there was any possibility of repairing it. However, the moment she rolled it up, she was stunned again. The red stone had broken into 2 pieces, and a naked baby was lying on her sleeve. His 2 little hands were desperately holding the cloth as he cried heartbreakingly, "Mommy, Mommy, Nyenma has finally found you. Don't you want Nyenma anymore?" Below, General Manager Mo's palace, who had not had time to leave, was also shocked by the scene. His mouth was so wide open that it could fit a duck egg. Mo was stunned. She looked down at the baby who was desperately clinging to her sleeve like an octopus. She was afraid that he would fall again, so she quickly used her sleeve to wrap him up. However, she was a little speechless. Did the baby born from the stone have a baby's nestling complex? The first person he saw after he was born was his own mother. However, fortunately, the little guy was fine. Seeing that he was crying so loudly and full of confidence, he should not be hurt. The little guy cried very happily. It seemed that he wanted to cry out all the grievances that he had not been able to see his mother these days. Tears rolled down one by one, and Mo's heart was in a mess. "Don't cry. Don't cry." Manager Mo Gong finally regained his senses. This stone fetus was too strange. It didn't come out earlier or later. It just had to come out of its shell when it was in the Devil Master's hands. It even made the Devil Master's body so wet and dirty. More importantly, it was one thing for a baby to roll out of the stone, but why were there so many other things? There were books, paintings, and even a rattle drum. What was even stranger was that although these things were rolled out from the fetal fluid, they were not wet at all. They were clean as if they were new. Lord Devil Master loved cleanliness. She would directly destroy her clothes if there were more water stains on her body. Now, her sleeves were wet with such a large unknown liquid, and that smoothed all. He hurriedly took a step forward. Demon Master, give him to me first, this doll was a freak. He had to get it out and study it. At the very least, he had to clean it up before considering if he should give it to the Lord Devil to play with. Mo looked at the crying doll on her sleeve and felt that it was time to deal with the child first. That, you first, just as he was about to say something along the lines of, go take a bath with the chief steward first, the child's body suddenly stiffened. Chapter 1591. Just as she was about to say something along the lines of, go out and take a bath with the head butler. Unexpectedly, the baby's body stiffened, and then he clung to her tightly. He looked up at her with tears in his eyes and complained, Mommy, don't you want Nyenma anymore? Nyenma has been so obedient. Don't abandon him. Mo was speechless. The little guy held on to her tightly as if he was afraid of being abandoned. His crying made her heart ache. She paused and waved her hand, indicating that the head butler could leave. The head butler was still holding a pile of things that had just rolled out of the stone. Naturally, he would not disobey the order of the Devil Lord. He turned and was about to leave. Unexpectedly, the baby opened his hands to him. My things. Don't take my things. Mo was afraid that he would cry again, so she simply rolled up her sleeves and took the things in the head butler's hands. Don't cry. Your things are here. The baby was satisfied this time. Once again, he lay on her sleeves. He was still puzzled. Why is Mommy's clothes so wet? Mo was speechless. She sighed softly. Naturally, she did not want to lower herself to the child's level. She waved her hand to let the head butler leave. Then, she turned around on the swing and disappeared. The steward left with a thunderous expression on his face. He knew that the Devil Lord liked children, but he did not expect that she liked them to the extent of indulgence. The baby that jumped out of the stone made her so dirty, but she did not even touch him. A gentle breeze blew, and the unmanned swing swayed a little. The surroundings returned to tranquility and peace. A moment later, a figure appeared on a big tree next to them. He had black hair and a white robe. He was as handsome as a painting. He looked down at the swaying swing not far away. There were dark waves surging in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. His body moved and landed directly on the swing. The swing swayed gently with him on it. There was a faint smell of her on the swing. It was so sweet and so familiar. When he breathed it in, his heart trembled as if it was scalded. Shuama, no matter what, I finally found you. It doesn't matter if you remember or not, I won't let go again. He sat on the swing, his white robes fluttering in the wind like snow. Hey, that's the Devil Master's swing, no one is allowed to sit on it. Not far away, a child ran over and pointed at him, accusing loudly, Hey, who are you? He didn't finish his sentence because he realized that the swing was empty. There wasn't a single person on it. The child rubbed his eyes again and mumbled, Strange, are my eyes playing tricks on me? There was a bathtub filled with moderately hot water, and a small child was happily splashing about in it. It feels so good to be able to come out. Mo squatted beside the basin and looked down at him. The little guy cried and laughed quickly. Just a moment ago, he was crying as if the sky had collapsed. Now, he was laughing like an angel. She looked at him in a daze. It was true that she liked children, but of all the children she had brought into the garden, none of them had been able to stir her emotions like this one. Could it be because she had personally delivered him? She watched the child happily play in the basin, so she let him do as he pleased. She raised her hand and the red stone that had broken in half appeared in her palm again. Chapter 1592. She raised her hand, and the broken red stone appeared in her palm again. She studied it for a moment and touched it with her hand. She did not expect that the stone could give birth to a baby. Then, she looked at the rattle drum and other things on the ground and shook her head. It was quite unbelievable. Her eyes fell on the scroll again. She paused for a moment and gently waved her sleeve. The scroll opened silently, and the person in the painting appeared. In the painting, there was a girl playing the pipa. She was about 18 or 19 years old. Her red dress was in full swing, and her eyes were lively. It was as if she could walk out of the painting with just a breath of air. "Mommy, that is you. Do I look good?" Shen Nianma held the edge of the basin with his two little hands. He looked at the painting and then at Mo. "Mommy is really beautiful. You look better than the painting." Mo raised her hand and touched her face. Then, she looked at the painting again and tilted her head as if she was thinking about something. She nodded and said, "You do look like you." She took the little guy out of the basin and wiped him dry with a cloth. The little guy obediently let her play with him and closed his eyes comfortably. His mommy's fingers were so soft and warm. In the past, she used to touch him through his belly. Now, she could really touch him. Babies like to be touched by their mothers. It was an instinct, and Shen Nianma was no exception. He did not expect to see his mommy again one day. He did not expect to be in his mommy's arms as soon as he was born. At this moment, Shen Nianma no longer blamed his father for betraying him. It felt good to be by his mommy's side. Shen Nianma happily rubbed his big head on his mommy's hand. However, his mommy looked so small. If he did not smell like his mommy, he would have called her sister when he fell into her sleeve. The little guy was indeed a child who jumped out of a stone. His skin was so soft and tender when he was just born. Especially when the little guy was so adorable. When he rubbed his big head on her hand, Mo felt as if her cold heart had been opened, revealing the softness in her heart. She didn't prepare any child's clothes here, so after giving the boy a bath, Mo couldn't find any clothes for him to wear. She wanted to conjure a set of clothes for him, but the clothes she conjured would contain a spell after all. She was afraid that the child's skin was too tender and wouldn't be able to withstand it. She hesitated for a moment before taking the sound-transmitting talisman and instructing palace manager Mo to buy several sets of baby clothes as quickly as possible. Of course, the faster, the more comfortable, the better. "What's your name?" Mo asked casually as he combed his soft hair. "Shen Nianma." Shen Nianma sat there obediently. Mo paused for a moment and looked at the child in a daze. "You have parents?" Shen Nianma turned his head and looked at her with confusion. "Mommy, aren't you my mother?" He pursed his lips and was about to cry again. "Mommy, don't tell me you still don't recognize me? Nianma misses you so much these days." He reached out his little hand and pulled her sleeve. His pair of eyes were covered with tears. He looked at her with watery eyes as if he was afraid that he would be abandoned. Mo's heart softened. She hugged him in her arms and kissed his forehead naturally. "Nianma, good boy. Mother. Mother recognizes you." Although it was a little awkward to say the word mother, there was some warmth in his heart. Chapter 1593. The little guy was very good at seizing the opportunity. He immediately stretched out his little arms and wrapped them around her neck. He kissed her on the cheek and then laid his big head on her shoulder. He greedily sniffed her scent and yawned. "Mother, I am sleepy." There was a gentle knock on the door. "Devil Master, I am here to bring you some clothes." Mo was slightly stunned. How fast? This time, the efficiency of the manager was extraordinarily high. She flicked her finger, and the door opened from both sides. She also used her sleeve to cover the little body of the baby in her arms. She was worried that he would catch a cold. General Manager Mo came in with a tray in his hand. There were a few sets of baby clothes neatly stacked on the tray. Devil Master, what do you think of these? The general manager handed the clothes to her. Mo did not take them with her hands. She only said, put them on the table over there. You can leave now. General Manager Mo's fingers froze for a moment. He retracted his hand and answered, yes. Then, he put the tray on the table. Mo did not pay attention to him. Her attention was focused on the baby in her arms. The little guy's hair was still wet. The wind might make him sick. Palace Manager Mo's gaze swept over her and the child. He looked at the little fellow lying in her arms with her bare buttocks and her arms wrapped around her neck. Her saliva was about to drip onto her mother's neck. Devil Master, why don't you let me help him get dressed? General Manager Mo volunteered. Palace Manager Mo was actually a rather handsome young man. He walked over as he spoke. Mo frowned slightly. No need. Get out. She did not know why, but she did not want anyone to take care of the baby on her behalf. General Manager Mo was stunned. His arms hung down. Yes. He walked backward and took a look at the little guy before he left. The little guy was sleepy with his eyes closed. He inexplicably shivered when he was glanced at. He looked up in a daze to see where the chill came from. There were only him and his mother in the room. He looked around and did not see anyone else, so he snuggled into his mother's arms and tried to find a comfortable position to sleep. Mo put him on the bed. When she was about to get up to check on the clothes, the little boy held her arm and refused to let go. Mother, don't leave me. I want to sleep with you. Mo patted his little body. Wait, mother will bring you some clothes. There was also demonic chi in her blanket, and this little fellow was covered in immortal chi. She was afraid that he would not be able to withstand it. She looked at the small clothes. The clothes were extraordinarily exquisite. Whether it was the cut or the fabric, they were all unique. She rubbed the small clothes with her hands. These clothes did not seem to be made of materials from this continent. She picked a set and put it on the little guy. The soft fabric was like clouds. After the little guy put it on, he stretched his arms and kicked his legs. It was obvious that he was very satisfied with the clothes. Mo looked at him in a daze for a moment, then got into bed and tucked him under the blanket. All right, go to sleep. She also closed her eyes. She was easily sleepy now, so it was necessary for her to sleep twice a day. Just when she was about to fall asleep, she felt something soft on her arm. A chubby little guy had squeezed into her blanket. Nianma wants mother to hug him to sleep. Big Head snuggled into her arms and used her arm as a pillow. Then, he closed his eyes again. Chapter 1594. Mo was not used to having a little boy in her arms all of a sudden. The sleepiness that she had just cultivated was all gone. She opened her eyes and looked at the child in her arms. There was a faint feeling in her heart. It was a kind of sharp pain that went deep into her soul. Before the image could appear, she forced it down. She closed her eyes and pulled her arm out from under the sleeping child. Silently, she moved to the side and slightly distanced herself from the child. The more you cared about something, the easier it was to lose it. Instead of that, she would rather not care about anything. Had she not lived the same way for the past 3 years? It was good to have such a carefree attitude. She did not want to change it. As for this child, it was better for her not to get too close. Shen Nianma was probably afraid of being abandoned. He was very insecure and felt that his mother was far away from him in his sleep. Even though he was still in a daze, his body still managed to roll to her side. He only stopped when he reached her arm. Then, he used his 2 little hands to hold her hand in his arms and murmured, "Mommy, don't abandon me." Imo was about to withdraw her hand, but when she heard him murmuring in his sleep, she froze. She lowered her eyes and let him hold her. The great devil liked to be quiet, so there were no other buildings around her palace. There were only countless tall trees that covered the sky. Shinjioli was sitting on top of a big tree with thick branches and leaves. The branches and leaves covered his body. He had also concealed his aura. Even if someone passed by under the tree, no one would be able to discover his whereabouts. Not far from the tree was Ning Shuima's palace. In the palace, his wife and son were sleeping soundly. If possible, he also wanted to sleep with his wife and son in his arms. However, he could not. Now was not the time for him to appear. If he appeared in front of her now, it would only make things worse. Therefore, he had to wait. He had to wait until the most suitable time to appear in front of her. Moreover, he had to make it so that she had no room to refuse. Shinjioli was rarely impulsive. Sometimes, he would be simple and direct. He would be quick and decisive to solve the problem completely. Otherwise, he could advance step by step. By the time the other party was alerted, he would have already set up all the traps and would not be able to escape even if he wanted to. Of course, there were very few things in this world that could trouble him. Most of the time, he used the first method to solve most problems. He was not in a hurry. He had endured for so long, so he did not mind waiting for a few more days. He lowered his eyes and pondered for a moment. Then, his figure flashed and left. He was very relieved that the child was with his mother. Right now, his top priority was to recover. He had to make the best use of his time to recover his strength. He knew of a good place to recover his strength. Yi Tianli did not expect that in less than a day after he left, Imo had a child in her arms. At that time, the sky was high, the clouds were light, and the wind was cool. Imo was playing on a swing with a child in her arms. The child was lying in her arms and swinging with her, giggling from the teasing. Yi Tianli was standing under the swing with a zither in his arms. He was a little surprised to see this scene. After a pause, he said, "Imo." Imo's red dress fluttered on the swing. She was holding the child with one arm. She tilted her head and looked at him. "You're here. Play another song. I'll swing him along with the music." She realized that the child had a strong sense of music. When she hummed a song, he would use his little hand to clap the beat for her. Chapter 1595. Yi Tianli was speechless. Indeed, he was good at playing the guqin. It was fun to please her with the music, but he could use it to coax the child. Imo, this child. He was about to ask if the child was also sent by someone else. Unexpectedly, the child wrapped his arms around Imo's neck and said softly, "Mother, Nianma is hungry." Yi Tianli was shocked. Mother? Wasn't it too casual to call her mother? He could not help but look at Imo. Imo seemed to have approved of the name. She raised her hand and rubbed Shin Nianma's head. "Okay, I will ask someone to prepare something for you. What do you want to eat?" She had never raised such a small child before, so she really did not know what he could eat. Shin Nianma immediately asked for a few things. Imo did not hesitate and immediately summoned the head servant of Palace Missouri to prepare. Yi Tianli was left alone for a long time. Finally, he could not help but ask, "Imo, when did this child come?" "Just last night." Imo casually said. She lowered her head and asked Shin Nianma, "Are you thirsty?" "Yes," Shin Nianma answered obediently. He was not thirsty, but he liked the feeling of being cared for by his mother. Also, he did not like the man standing below. He always felt that he was going to steal his mother away. Yi Tianli staggered. Just born. For the first time, the gentle and elegant son of the celestial world, who would not change his expression even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, stuttered. He was really shocked. He was going to be engaged with his sweetheart tomorrow, but she came out today with a child. The problem was, he did not see her pregnant. She even looked like a virgin. How could it be? At this moment, the head servant of Palace Missouri came in and explained, this child was sent by someone. He was born in a stone embryo. Before he could finish his explanation, Mo glared at him. The head servant immediately shut up. Yi Tianli heaved a sigh of relief. That scared him. He looked at the child again. The child was holding a jade cup and drinking water. His posture was actually quite elegant. He did not look like a child who had just been born. Was he born in a stone embryo? A demon child? No, there was no demonic aura on his body. Instead, there seemed to be a faint white glow around him. That was the holy light that even ordinary immortals did not have. Yi Tianli raised his hand and shot out a gentle silver light. He wanted to test the child's aptitude. Unexpectedly, just as he shot out the silver light, the child screamed, "Mommy, he wants to kill me." A white light shot out from his body and went straight for the silver light. The silver light was more powerful than the white light. Seeing that the silver light was about to cover Shen Nianma's head, Mo raised his sleeve. A faint red light met the silver light. The silver light trembled and disappeared in an instant. What are you doing? Mo glanced at Yi Tianli, his voice cold. Yi Tianli was speechless. I just wanted to test his aptitude. No need. Mo held the child in his arms. He's mine. You don't have to ask. Yi Tianli, he paused for a moment. Mo, we will be engaged tomorrow. I will be your future husband. If this child recognizes you as his mother, I will be his future father. At first, Shen Nianma did not understand what he said. However, he understood the last sentence. He immediately opened his eyes wide. No. I want my own father. I don't want him to be my father. Yi Tianli was speechless. His eyes flashed slightly. He gently said, Nianma, your name is Nianma, right? Who is your father? Tell me, and I will help you find him, okay? Chapter 1596. He did not like the child. If the child had parents, he would help to find them so that the child would not have to pester Mo like this. Oh no. Shen Nianma shook his head like a rattle drum and looked at him with caution. You are a bad person. You want to separate me and my mother. I don't want to talk to you. Yi Tianli was speechless. This kid. He smiled and did not want to argue with the child. He shook his head and ignored him. He looked at Mo and said, Mo, this child is really attached to you. He probably thinks that you are his mother. She's my mother. Shen Nianma interrupted him unhappily and even kissed Mo's neck to show off. His saliva was all over Mo's face. Yi Tianli was speechless again. He could not be serious with a child. He looked at Shen Nianma again and suddenly had a thought. The child's mouth and nose were similar to Mo's. Was it a coincidence? Or was it? Nianma, this name seemed to be a little special. He blurted out, did this child really jump out from the stone? At this time, General Manager Mo could finally interrupt. It is true. The stone that the child hid in was sent by me. General Manager Mo would not lie. Yi Tianli nodded. The child's origin is indeed strange. Where did the stone come from? It was sent by a child. General Manager Mo answered. He Mu, are you this seat's chief steward or his chief steward? Mo asked coldly. General Manager Himu shuddered and finally came back to his senses. He seemed to have said too much. He quickly took a step back and did not want to say anything more. Mo looked at Yi Tianli with a faint smile. Is it necessary for you to investigate my affairs so thoroughly? Mo, I am just doing it for your own good. Yi Tianli sighed softly. This is the first time I see you being so concerned about a child, so I want to know more about him to avoid any accidents that might hurt you. I don't need your kindness. I know what I am doing. Mo stuffed a small pastry into Shen Nianma's mouth to stop him from talking. Yi Tianli smiled and cleverly stopped talking about this topic. Mo, shall we go to the pear sea today? The pear blossoms over there are blooming nicely. Mo was a little lazy. When she was about to say no, Shen Nianma's eyes lit up. Li Hua. Nianma wanted to see it. Mother, can you bring Nianma to have a look? He asked softly. Mo's heart softened, and she nodded. Okay. Yi Tianli's heart skipped a beat again. He quietly glanced at Shen Nianma. In fact, he did not want Mo to bring this little burden, but, he smiled and said, if that's the case, let's go. He stretched out his hand. Mo, you must be tired of carrying him all the time. Why don't you give him to me? It's a good opportunity for me to cultivate a relationship with him. No, no. Shen Nianma immediately hugged Mo's neck and refused to let go. I only want my mother to hug me, not him. This child was indeed too clingy. Usually, people who clung to her did not end up well. Mo's face darkened. Let go. Her voice was slightly cold, and the faint aura around her made Shen Nianma's little body stiffen. He slowly let go of his hand and looked at Mo with a pair of big eyes. Mother? Was his mother scolding him? Chapter 1597. Mo did not look at him. If you want to see the pear blossoms with me, then be a good boy and let Uncle Yi carry you. She pushed Shen Nianma into Yi Tianli's arms and turned to leave. Yi Tianli smiled and looked at the little guy in his arms. He patted his back and said, a good boy is a good boy. Shen Nianma was angry. He was a clean freak. He only allowed his mother and father to carry him. Who was this man? He did not want to listen to him. He immediately slapped Yi Tianli. Let me go. I don't want you to carry me. Slap. His slap landed on Yi Tianli's face. After all, he was the son of God. Although he was not like the legendary Neza who could turn the world upside down when he was born, he was still very strong. He had even cultivated his telekinesis. Therefore, the slap on Yi Tianli's face was very loud and clear. After the sound, there was a bright red handprint on Yi Tianli's handsome face. Yi Tianli did not expect the little guy to slap him. He loosened his arms and the little guy almost fell to the ground. What's wrong? Mo turned back. Yi Tianli smiled bitterly. This child's temper. It seems that he is a little impatient. He probably doesn't want me to carry him. Nianma, apologize. Mo looked at the handprint on Yi Tianli's face. Her pretty face sank. This child was indeed a little arrogant. Shen Nianma pouted and was a little angry. He raised his head and said, no. I don't want this person to carry me. He is a bad guy. Mo raised her hand and pulled him out from Yi Tianli's arms. I will say it again. Apologize. If you don't apologize, my mother will no longer recognize you. Shen Nianma's little face was red. His mother was scolding him because of a man. There were tears in his big eyes. In fact, he was still very angry. At this time, he felt wronged. I don't want to. With a whoosh, his little body was thrown out and fell into the arms of General Manager Heimu, who was stunned. Then don't go. Heimu, look after him. Head steward Heimu hugged the soft little bun in his arms and could only bitterly say, yes. Mommy, don't you want me anymore? Shin Nyenma finally burst into tears. Ah Mo's heart seemed to have been stabbed by something. She slightly lowered her eyes and looked at Shin Nyenma. The little guy was crying in the arms of General Manager Heimu. She clenched her fists in her sleeves and turned around. Yi Tianli, let's go. The two of them flew in harmony. Their conversation could be heard faintly in the air. Ah Mo, just call me Tianli. It's just a habit. I hope you'll get used to calling me husband one day. The two silhouettes, one green and one red, gradually disappeared in the air, and could no longer be seen. Mother really didn't want him anymore. Shin Nyenma cried hysterically in Himu's arms. It was the first time he cried so loudly since he was born. The little guy's cries were very contagious. Even someone as cold-hearted as head steward Heimu felt his eyes ache from his cries. Thousands of pear trees were blooming. The snow-white petals of the pear blossoms fluttered in the air and fluttered to the ground. The scenery was too beautiful to behold. Ah Mo walked among them. Her black hair fluttered, and her red dress fluttered. She was like a painting. Yi Tianli walked side by side with her. He sighed softly. Ah Mo, I hope we can have this day every year. Ah Mo raised her head and looked around the pear blossom forest. She was a little distracted. She did not know why, but Shin Nyenma's big teary eyes kept flashing in front of her. She even seemed to hear his cries in her ears. In the small theater Shin Jiuli coldly said, Moo Moo, you can torture me. I am not afraid of torture, but how dare you torture my baby? Are you not afraid that I will slap you away? Moo Moo immediately smiled flatteringly. That, great God, this is the plot's need, your wife is too cold now, you have to let her live again, you can't stir up waves in her heart, let your son do it. Shinjuli was speechless. I'd rather you torture me. Moo Moo sighed. These days, there are still people who want to be tortured. Shinjuli's voice was cold. What did you say? Moo Moo immediately smiled. Well, it's nothing. Oh right, great master, you have always been high and mighty in this drama. You are known as the great master. Now, Moo Moo has also participated in the competition between the goddesses. It is now the last round, the decisive moment. Can you get your fans to like my post and post a comment for me? Shinjuli, where? Moo Moo, it's in the comments section below the book, in the pinned post. Click on it and let the fans stretch out their cute little hands, like the post and leave a comment. Of course, your fans are as talented as the clouds. If you follow the request and post a 300-word long comment, that would be even better. Shinjuli snorted. What's the reward? Moo Moo gritted his teeth. How about more than 1,000 likes and one more comment? Shinjuli, deal. Chapter 1598. She frowned. Something was wrong with her state of mind. Even if the child was close to her, he was not hers after all, she was the one who brought him out of the stone shell. He called her mother, but she might not be his mother, she seemed to have placed too much emphasis on the child. Mo, what's wrong? Mo was distracted for a moment. She tripped over a tree root and staggered. Yi Tianli hurriedly supported her. Mo touched her forehead and closed her eyes slightly. When she opened them again, they were clear. She smiled, nothing, Yi Tianli. Play another song for me. She flew up to a pear tree and leaned on the branch, looking like she was all ears. Yi Tianli naturally would not refuse her request, okay. His eyes flashed slightly. Mo seemed to be particularly easy to talk to today. She also smiled more. One of them was listening on the tree while the other was playing under the tree. It was harmonious and beautiful. Time slipped by in this harmonious and beautiful atmosphere. The two of them had a lot of fun this time. When they returned, the sky was already filled with stars. Before they parted, Yi Tianli held Mo's hand. Under the starlight, his eyes were as bright as the stars. Mo, tomorrow is our big day. After tomorrow, we can be together forever. Do you like it? Mo yawned, I like it. It seemed good to have someone to accompany her like this. Her days were not so difficult. Under the starlight, she was stunningly beautiful. Her indifferent appearance had a strange temperament that made Yi Tianli's heart beat faster. He couldn't help but raise his hand and pull her, wanting to pull her into his embrace for a kiss. However, he didn't expect that the other party would just lift her sleeve and escape his grasp. She waved her hand at him and said, "All right, go. See you tomorrow." She turned around and disappeared without a trace. Yi Tianli stood there for a moment and looked at his hand. It still had the residual warmth of her hand. That small hand seemed to have always been cold, like a cold soft jade. When he held it, it seemed to be able to freeze his heart. Was it because she was a demon? He did not know if her lips were as cold as her hand. When they were engaged tomorrow, he should be able to taste her lips, right? Who knew that he had been with her for more than a year, and they had been together almost every day, but they had never been intimate. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but she had a kind of intimidating aura that made him not dare to act rashly. Up until now, it was just a simple handshake. However, it would be different after tomorrow. Tomorrow, he would officially be her fiancé. Everything would be different from what it used to be. She probably wouldn't reject him if he tried to be intimate with her again. When Mo returned to Mo Palace, it was already close to dawn. She had wanted to summon Himu to ask about little Munchkin's situation, but on second thought, she decided against it. That child would only cry a few times. He was probably asleep by now. It wouldn't be too late for her to visit him tomorrow. Thinking of this, she directly returned to her own palace. She liked peace and quiet, so she didn't need any maids to serve her. Her palace was only cleaned by her maids at a specific time every morning. Usually, there was no one in her palace. She walked to the door of her bedroom and suddenly paused. There was a small figure curled up in front of the door. He was sitting there motionlessly, as if he had fallen asleep. Her heart felt like it had been hit by something. Chapter 1599. She felt as if her heart had been struck by something. Little Munchkin. Why was he here? What was the bastard Himu doing? Why did he let the child run out alone? She stepped forward and carried the little guy. However, she felt that something was wrong. The little guy's body was hot as if he was having a fever. She looked at his face under the starlight and felt as if her heart was being pricked again. The little guy's face was pale, and his eyes were swollen like walnuts. Apparently, he had been crying for a long time. She did not know if he was asleep or unconscious at the moment. His little nose was moving, and from time to time, he would say in his sleep, "Mommy, don't abandon Myanmar." Mo's arm trembled slightly. She raised her hand and touched his forehead. It was also hot. Her heart tightened. Myanmar, Myanmar. She tried to call him a few times. The little guy's body stiffened, and he slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were so swollen that he could only open them slightly. The moment he saw Mo, he tried hard to open his eyes. There were tears in his eyes. He reached out his little hand and carefully touched her cheek. "Mommy?" Mo's heart ached. She answered, "Myanmar, why are you here?" Didn't he make arrangements for you? This bastard. I will call him here now. Shin Nianma's body trembled. He hugged her arm tightly and pouted as if he was about to cry. However, he tried hard to hold it in. He tried to negotiate with her. Nianma wants to sleep with mommy. I don't want him. Mommy, please don't abandon me again, okay? I will be good and listen to you. I will not throw tantrums anymore. His voice was choked with sobs. His careful behavior inexplicably made Mo feel suffocated. It was as if a ball of cotton was stuffed in her throat. She almost could not speak. Nianma. She called out to him, but didn't know what to say for a moment. She sighed and was just about to carry him into her bedroom when she saw head steward Himu rushing over. She stopped in her tracks and looked at him coldly. When Himu saw the child in her arms, he let out a sigh of relief. However, when he saw the expression on the Devil Lord's face, he trembled again and knelt down. Devil Lord, I did not do a good job. Please punish me. What is going on? How could you leave him here alone so late at night? Mo's voice was so cold that it could freeze ice. Head steward Himu felt bitter in his heart. He never thought that this little ancestor could cry so much. Ever since the great devil master and Yi Tianli left, he had been crying non-stop. One moment, he cried for his mother, and the next moment, he cried and said, Nianma will be good. Mommy will come back. No matter how hard he tried to coax her, she wouldn't budge. He almost suspected that the child was made of water. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Tomorrow was the day of the wedding, and head steward Himu had many things to do, so he didn't have time to hold the child often. The child was crying so much that in his anxiety, he locked him up in a small dark room, hoping to teach him a lesson. Of course, he was also afraid that he would get into an accident. The walls of the small dark room were soft, so even if he bumped around inside, he wouldn't have any problems. After locking up the little fellow, he went to do other things. By the time head steward Himu thought of him again, 4 hours had already passed. In the end, he was still worried and ran back. From afar, he could still hear the little fellow's heart-wrenching cries. That voice was already hoarse, his heart tightened, and he finally realized that locking him in the dark room would not work. It would only make things worse. He quickly carried him out and comforted him for a long time. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.